Game of Thrones Revolution. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26. The Prince's Dishonor. Violet, wearing a uniquely beautiful outfit in this world, rode on a brown mare, looking heroic. Beside her, Myrcella rode a pure white mare, wearing a light yellow pleated skirt, and strolled sideways on the plain grass. On the other side, Timon rode a great colt, trying to keep up with the other two. Violet, your swordsmanship teaching is really unique. Whether it is the basic posture or the swinging and slashing, it is so graceful like a dance. Even I want to learn a set. Myrcella's temperament is just like her appearance, gentle and generous, giving people a feeling of spring breeze. Violet looked at the gray sky. During this period, she would look in that direction every few days. The sky changed from bright blue, sky blue, gray blue, to the current gray and white. Winter is come in, and the long summer is coming to an end. Such an atmosphere is simply the beginning of tragedy for Myrcella, who was like a messenger of spring. She once asked Seed where in the world there was a continuous summer, allowing everything to grow continuously. Seed told her that in the distant Valyrian Islands, there was a land called the Land of Long Summer, where there might be a year-round summer that would never be interrupted. She explained her idea and wanted to take Myrcella there. She is the Princess of Spring. Seed was silent for a long time and responded, without the land where she was born and raised, Myrcella cannot live happily even if there's a long summer there. Violet predicted Myrcella's fate and got the color of winter forever. She looked at her, with indescribable sadness in her heart, and only hoped that she could fully experience the beauty of life in this late summer. Rapier is meant for women to learn. My swordsmanship is like dancing, and it is largely derived from the flower sword that is similar to the rapier. If there's a chance, I will make a Valyrian rapier with beautiful patterns for the princess, which will definitely allow you to show your heroic spirit in the tournament. Myrcella's yearning expression made her heart ache. Don't dream about it. Father won't let my sister go so easily. She has to learn embroidery first. Look at Sansa from the Stark family. She is not only elegant and well-mannered, but also has exquisite embroidery skills. Father has mentioned many times that the nuns should intensify my sister's training. The fat boy Timon poured cold water on his head, causing the good-tempered Myrcella to glare at him several times. The fat boy didn't care, but looked like a trick had succeeded. I guess Arya and the others are almost done with their training. Violet rescued Myrcella, and the three of them rode their horses into the depths of the broadleaf forest. This is not the wolf forest in the north, where there are few wild beasts. As for the bandits, they will not approach the royal team, so they are not afraid of danger and gallop in the shadows of the trees in the forest. There is a clearing deep in the dense forest. Arya and the butcher's apprentice are practicing swordsmanship there. Violet taught Arya stabbing swordsmanship and helped the butcher's apprentice practice steel sword fighting techniques. The two thanked her and called her master. Because of Violet, Arya became closer to the princess and the little prince. They talked and laughed, and the harmonious atmosphere made Robert and the Duke very happy, and then allowed Violet to accompany them to play every day. The Queen was not willing to let the children, especially her children, relax and play every day, but Robert insisted, which made Arya and the others successful and able to get professional guidance from Violet. I thought I would hear the sound of wooden sticks hitting and the screams of being beaten, but I didn't expect to hear screams, wolf howls and strange laughter in the deep forest. Violet signaled the princess and the little prince to follow slowly, and she rode through the bushes and appeared in the open space. The situation that came into view was quite strange. The two people in the standoff were Prince Joffrey and the butcher's apprentice, and Sansa and Arya were screaming something on both sides. The little wolf numbered by a guarded Arya lowered her head and rode at the prince. The two people in the standoff, Joffrey held the lion's tooth in his hand, while the butcher's apprentice was empty-handed. Joffrey had already used the lion's fang to cut a deep bloody mark on the apprentice's face. Thick blood gushed out, turning the apprentice into a half-blooded man. Stop. Your Highness, what are you doing? Violet didn't understand what was going on, but she saw that the prince was holding a sharp blade and facing the unarmed butcher's apprentice, which was really against the spirit of chivalry. Joffrey turned around and saw that it was her, with a look of disdain on his face. Get out of the way, let me teach this arrogant guy who dared to attack Lady Arya a lesson. Humph. I'm your butcher's apprentice, do you want to be a knight? Well, I'll give you a chance, pick up the sword. Joffrey's face showed a crazy look. I didn't, really, she asked me to do it. The butcher's apprentice was so scared that he didn't dare to move, watching Joffrey continue to cut his cheek with the long sword. Stop. I told him to do this, Arya screamed. Stop it, don't do it again. Sansa covered her eyes and screamed. Violet was also embarrassed. She didn't expect this to happen. If it was just a knight, even a duke, she would stand up angrily and fight on behalf of the butcher apprentice. There is no honor in holding a sharp blade against an unarmed person. If you really want to kill, then come and compete with her. She will let the mad guy understand that once the sword is unsheathed, blood will inevitably be drawn. But the one in front of her is Prince Joffrey, and the prince is not yet an adult. As an adult, it is impossible to bully a child. The entanglement in her heart made her forehead sweat in just a few seconds. Fatty, you have to pay the price for your actions. Joffrey slowly put away his long sword. It was not that he felt pity, but this was the starting move of the long sword thrust. You bad guy. Arya picked up the stick angrily and attacked Joffrey from behind. Sansa was still screaming, and Myrcella came to the open space and screamed in surprise. Violet didn't know what to do. I'll take care of it. Sigra's voice echoed in her mind calmly and ruthlessly, and Violet became a spectator of her own body. If we want to fight, how can we not have a proper venue and witnesses? As she spoke, Violet's body rode up on her war horse. The neighing of the horse startled everyone and they all looked over. Prince Joffrey was so frightened that his body trembled. Violet was already in front of him. She grabbed the prince's wrist without saying anything and lifted him up like a chicken. The prince was tall and strong, even taller and stronger than Violet, but he had no strength to resist. She pressed the prince on the horse's back and reached out with her other hand to grab the butcher's apprentice who had no time to escape and lifted him up. All of you, follow me. We have to testify in front of the king. Violet's eyes flashed fiercely. The children were so scared that they dared not breathe. Even the little direwolf couldn't help but whimper and retreated to Arya's side, trembling. In front of the Queen's wood house, King Robert looked confused and impatient, Duke Stark looked solemn, and Queen Tressay looked even more ugly. Nobles and knights gathered around them. There were a few new faces in the crowd. A handsome young knight wearing green armor and golden antlers on his helmet, and an old knight with white hair and beard, wearing milky white armor and a white cloak. What are you doing? Sword dancer, your mission is to protect the princess and the little prince. Why are you holding on to my son Joffrey? Robert asked, glancing at the queen who was smoking above his head. Compared with his harsh words, his expression was quite intriguing, just like a child who was upset when his favorite performance was interrupted or his game was disturbed. Violet bowed and saluted. Your Majesty, I am here for Prince Joffrey's education. How can you interfere in the prince's education? The queen was angry, and the kingslayer beside her, Jaime Lannister, pressed his hand on the hilt of the sword. Dan, Sig used Violet's hand to pull out the lion's fang. Violet flipped her finger lightly, and the lion's fang made a sharp sound, and under the astonished gaze of the crowd, it broke into several pieces. The queen was deprived of her power and was speechless for a moment. Violet bowed to the king again. Your Majesty, I have the duty of protecting the princess. I was chosen by you to be a knight because of your love. Therefore, I hope to be worthy of the title of knight. She pointed at the children who were gathered together and didn't know what to do. The princess, the little prince, and the two daughters of the duke can testify that I saw something extremely dishonorable today. His Royal Highness actually threatened an unarmed person with a long sword. Even if he was a butcher's apprentice, this kind of thing is against the spirit of chivalry and seriously undermines the dignity of the royal family. She spoke very quickly, not allowing anyone to interrupt or refute. The queen wanted to interrupt, but she didn't have time. She was so angry that her chest heaved up and down, and her brows were furrowed. Sig didn't mean to wait for others to disrupt the situation. He still spoke at a speed that was beyond ordinary people, but everyone could hear clearly. I suggest that no matter what kind of grudges the prince is with the butcher's apprentice, give them a chance to compete, and let the king himself be a witness. After he finished speaking, everyone was in an uproar. Chapter 27 Poor Robert, you want my son to fight a lowly butcher's apprentice. The queen's beautiful face was twisted with anger. She clenched her fists and her fists trembled in the air. I want to let His Royal Highness understand what honor is. Even if he is so noble, he must give a long sword when inviting him to a duel. No one will follow a guy without honor. Violet's face was as cold as ice. Privately, the real Violet tried hard to remember this moment. She hoped that at least she would not have to bother Sig in the future and could do things well by herself. She turned to King Robert and said, Your Majesty, since the prince is of noble status, it is too dangerous to duel with real swords. I suggest that the two of them fight with wooden swords and you will be the judge. Huh, you guys? You all think I'm free, don't you? The king of the country is actually playing house with children here. Robert's eyes were red, holding the bottle of fruit wine in his left hand. Beside him, Ned had been trying to snatch the bottle, but failed. Violet had a smile on her face, and the coldness in her eyes became more and more biting. Children's duels meaningless. How about it if an adult acts as a proxy? Your Highness will find a knight to replace him, and I will represent the butcher's apprentice. Such a duel will surely not be a waste of time," she said leisurely, with a sense of persuasion. "Since the Battle of Three Forks, you have rarely experienced the battlefield. Is your Majesty afraid of the smell of blood?" The latter words were spoken very softly, and only Robert and Ned could hear them clearly. Duke Stark looked at Violet in astonishment, his face full of disbelief. The drunk king had a gloomy face. "I made you a knight just to take care of my Marcella's feelings. Do you really want to die?" Violet smiled meaningfully, her smile was wild. "The majesty of the royal family, the education of the prince and the fragrance of blood, it is rare to have the best of all three, why not give it a try? It's just the life of a woman of unknown origin. You're galloping on the battlefield, do you still care about a life?" Her words penetrated into the depths of the soul and tickled some people's itch. "Sword dancer, this is simply the devil's persuasion. Robert, I suggest you disperse everyone, this is a farce." Duke Stark frowned, just like the hand of a king. "Little girl, you want blood, I will give you a chance, don't blame the sword for being blind." King Robert staggered to the middle of the crowd, he needed the help of the Duke to stand firm. "I declare in the name of King Robert that I will witness the duel between the two sides, my son Joffrey, who was your agent." The king's face was very ugly, and there was a hint of murder in his eyes. Joffrey shrank his shoulders. "I am willing to fight." Sandor Clegane, known as the Hound, stepped out. "Ha ha, my dog is enough to tear an ugly woman to pieces." The prince showed a mean smile. "Duh." Robert spat at Joffrey, who was pale and didn't understand. "Joffrey, go on yourself, use your hands to witness, let the blood splash on your face, then you can smell the sweetness of it." In his drunken eyes, there was a blood red, extremely ferocious. Joffrey opened his mouth, but dared not make a sound. "Ha ha, that's too funny, Robert, your son is afraid to face a woman." "Ha ha ha ha," the handsome knight wearing a deerskin helmet laughed. Robert's face showed anger. "Merling, escort Renly back, don't let him laugh too much, it's not good for his health." Among the Iron Guards, Sir Merain, with a gloomy face, dragged away Renly Baratheon, who was laughing non-stop. The real Violet exclaimed that this was the most handsome knight she had ever seen. Violet, controlled by Sigurd, faced Prince Joffrey directly, with a sneer on her lips. "Your Highness, given the difference in strength, I suggest that you use lion's fangs, and I use a wooden sword." "No, I can use a broom. I hope this duel will not be too boring." She made an elegant yawning gesture. Joffrey was so angry that he trembled all over, and unexpectedly did not agree to the request for a duel. "Look at you, a coward. You're taller than her." Robert's face showed anxiety. "Lannister woman, what have you taught my son to be like?" Queen Robert retorted, "He is also your son. The mother teaches the child etiquette, and the father teaches him to hold a sword. What have you done?" "Let me fight." Jaime Lannister, dressed in gold, stepped out. He stared at Violet coldly. "Woman, I can't show mercy in a formal duel. If you want to save yourself, surrender as soon as possible." The real Violet found that Sigurd had no good feelings towards this guy with lazy eyes. "So you're the Kingslayer. During the duel, we are face to face. I am not like the Mad King, who is his back to you." Jaime's face was flushed, and his eyes were full of anger. "Ha ha ha ha." Robert laughed wildly, even tears flowed out. "What a sharp tongue." Then he adjusted his expression and looked gloomy. Sigurd used her body to touch his chest as a greeting. "Your Majesty, I have my own reasons. If I can win this duel, I hope your Majesty will agree that I will be responsible for His Highness Joffrey's swordsmanship." "Ha, wishful thinking." The Queen's sharp and harsh words like a sword were bounced away by Sigurd's casual and free temperament. "Woman, you're crazy. There is no shortage of swordsmen in the Red Castle. It will never be our turn." Robert's face was no longer drunk. He was looking at Violet with an oppressive gaze. She felt uncomfortable being looked at by the king. But Sig didn't buy it. He controlled her body and faced the king directly. "Your Majesty, you must know another noble Lord Robert." "What do you mean, woman?" At the age of 6 or 7, he still clings to his mother's arms to drink milk. He has a weird temper and a fragile mind. I remember that poor little guy. Only by leaving our mother can the child be truly saved. Robert said impatiently, "What do you mean?" "I hate beating around the bush." Violet looked at the Queen. "Your Majesty, what I saw was poor little Robert clinging to his mother's arms. Asshole, I won't let you go." The Queen was furious. If it weren't for the nun pulling her, she would have rushed forward. Robert remained silent, his face uncertain. "Let's duel. You can't possibly get the prince's education." The Kingslayer's eyes were much firmer than before, his eyes were full of murderous intent, and his long sword, which was shining with a golden luster, had already been unsheathed. Violet didn't look at the aggressive Kingslayer, but faced the king directly. "If you still have reason, even if I lose, I will find a suitable teacher for the prince." She drew out her long sword. "Your Majesty, please witness my duel with the Kingslayer. Believe me, this must be an exciting performance." "A duel is not a performance. You will regret it." The Kingslayer's face was full of murderous intent. "Let's start." Robert waved his hand, as if to drive away the flies around him. Jaime Lannister straightened his posture, and his long sword reflected the shadow of the audience. "You go first. I don't want to take advantage of a woman." "What a bad idea. How could I let you take advantage of me?" Seed teased him with Violet's mouth. Her figure was as smooth as flowing water, and her movements were so smooth that they didn't look like humans. The Kingslayer blocked a sword attack from an unexpected direction with a look of astonishment on his face, but missed, and Violet's sword was lifted from the bottom up. The Kingslayer staggered away, and a strand of golden hair in the forehead guard of his helmet became Violet's achievements. "Please don't be too easy, or you will die." Violet took small steps, her body nimble. The Kingslayer's face flushed, he lowered his voice, shrugged, and stared at the tip of the sword. The opponent was serious, but it was not much different when facing Sig. Violet grasped the longsword and thrust forward, with ease and casualness. The Kingslayer used the longsword to deflect the tip of her sword, and he extended his left elbow forward, and the end of the metal guard pierced her face. The two were very fast, and Violet crashed into the Kingslayer's elbow. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novellas. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28. The Wise King and the Famous Ministers. Robert didn't want to see women being humiliated, let alone being hurt. Women are meant to be loved, not beaten. The problem was that stinky woman, Cersei Lannister, who always touched his most sensitive nerves. Many times he wanted to punch her, and more often this woman would stand in front of him in a provocative manner. She didn't know how hard it was for him to endure. He was very angry, especially when the sword dancer mentioned that Joffrey was similar to the sick boy in Uttering Valley. He almost rushed over to strangle the queen. The sword dancer was right. Joffrey looked tall and handsome on the surface, but he was actually very weak. I really doubted if he was not in good health, he would still be rushing to the queen's chest to ask for milk. He was very grateful to the sword dancer, a girl who could still be called a little girl, who had a sense of honor and responsibility that was not inferior to that of a real knight. It was a pity that she found an opponent who was too strong. I hope the Kingslayer still has some honor in his heart and will not hurt the little girl too badly. The sword shadow flashed on the duel field, and Robert tilted his head and said to Ned, "The sword dancer's skills are impeccable, but the arena is not a place for quarrels. In the end, it's strength that counts." Ned agreed with him, with a look of regret on his face. The two duelists heard the sound of weapons clashing, and Violet's long sword was knocked away. The Kingslayer stabbed the girl in the face with the edge of his handguard. Damn it, does he know what he's doing? Robert was furious. He wanted to swing his warhammer and rush forward himself. The pleated skirts spun quickly like petals in the wind. The scene was so beautiful that Robert forgot that the duel was a matter of life and death. Ding! A long metal collision sounded, and Violet used the force to float away from the core of the duel. The Kingslayer looked at his left shoulder coldly, his eyes widened. "Kill that woman." The queen gritted her teeth and said, "No, I lost." Jaime Lannister seemed to have suffered a great blow, and even his shoulders drooped. He dropped his sword, clanking, and the sunlight reflected the golden thread wrapped around the hilt. "Are you crazy? Come back. Kill this woman, while let her go." The queen screamed hysterically. The women and children in the crowd were confused and bewildered. Those who knew swordsmanship were all horrified. Robert saw everything, and he patted his cheek to make sure it was not an illusion because of drunkenness. What happened in an instant was that the sword dancer drew out the rapier of the auxiliary weapon and hit the neck armor of the Kingslayer. The crisp sound was caused by that blow. If the sword dancer had the heart, she would definitely be able to pierce the neck of the Kingslayer, but she showed mercy. "You see, your Kingslayer was defeated by the little girl. If she hadn't held back, your brother's neck would have been bleeding profusely." Robert asked Violet to come closer. "Little girl, if you have any requests, I will give them to you while I am happy." Violet staggered. Maybe it was an illusion, he felt that her expression became much softer. "Your Majesty, I need honor. Please give me the honor of teaching the prince swordsmanship." "No, I don't want her to teach me. She is a woman, how can she teach me to use a sword?" Joffrey screamed. "Shut up." Robert stopped Joffrey with his eyes. This was what made him most angry. Joffrey, his son, who was tall and strong, was actually scared and looked like he was about to cry. "Look at what you have become. It's all the result of your mother's spoiling." The angrier he got, the more Joffrey shrank. It's really hard to imagine that it was his child. Robert spat, "Sword dancer, I give you the honor of teaching the prince and give you the title of knight." She smiled like a flower. Robert sighed in his heart, why his wife didn't have such a good character. The sinister gaze came from the side. He knew whose gaze it was. "Don't look at me like that, this is for Joffrey. You have educated him to be a coward." "Hey, woman." Robert waved his hand to let everyone leave. As Joffrey screamed, Violet threw his lion's fang and the fragments of the sword into the river. "You are not suitable for real swords. Let's talk about it when you are good enough." As dusk fell, Robert used the remaining time to hunt a huge wild boar. The camp was full of a lively atmosphere. The wild boar feast was enough for the nobles to enjoy, and the servants and soldiers also had a variety of delicious food. A huge pot was set up, and the wild boar was skinned and cut into pieces and thrown into the pot to cook. After removing the bloody smell from the pork, some of the best leg meat and hot meat would be taken out, roasted on the fire, and coated with honey and various spices. It wouldn't take too long before the delicious roast meat could be served on the plate. Robert did not invite the women. Although he wanted to eat with the children, considering the woman's sarcasm and fearing that he would accidentally punch her in front of the children, he finally gave up. He called his half-brother Ned to accompany him. The two talked about the adventures and debauchery of their youth, and time flew by. "Hey, you should take the bastard with you. He is the one who looks most like you among your sons," Robert said while rinsing his mouth with lemonade. "Catelyn believes that bastards are a symbol of dishonor for the family and are not suitable to be brought to King's Landing," Ned said distressedly. "Autumn," Robert almost spit out a mouthful of water, "women know nothing about honor. A son is a man's hope. Watching a little cub who looks like you grow up and be able to swing a sword to kill the enemy is the joy of life." He sighed, shook his head, and stared at Ned with a squint. "You are always bound by responsibilities, laws, and rules. What's the point of such a life? When you ask your wife to do something, do you have to body her first and ask if she is ready?" Ned's serious look almost drove Robert crazy. If he laughed unkindly at this time, he might not be able to be brothers in this life. Robert finally calmed down after using 2 glasses of lemon water to moisten his throat. "Forget it, you shouldn't blame yourself. You and Catelyn have just met at that time, and God knows if you will see each other again in the future." He racked his brains to comfort his bitter-faced brother. "But we are already married, and she has Rob." Ned continued to respond seriously. He felt awkward, as if something was stuck in his teeth. There is no hope. The king's mission should be given to you or earned. You're definitely more qualified than me." Robert shook his head. "In the end, you'll let me take over. You know, every day is torture for me. Life is like this. You govern the country in King's Landing, and I comfort the people in the north and guard the north." Ned's expression seemed to be more like enjoying it. "This is your life, not mine." Robert lay on a high-back chair, looking at the red clouds in the sky. "Take the hammer, ride a warhorse, and wander around the world with you. Kill the guys you don't like, and take the beautiful girls into the haystack when you meet them. If we can live such a life, the bards will love us to death." He looked at the sky, like a child who didn't want to wake up from a dream. "The reality is that you have to take responsibility for your family and the people. You have a wife and children, they need to be taken care of, and you have to think about their future." Ned made a disgusting general statement. "Do you know why I didn't realize that dream?" Robert suddenly missed his first child in the Uring Valley. She was a girl, raised by him and a farm girl. What a cute baby. "It is because of Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen that I have to fulfill my father's responsibility, so you must help me, not just me." Robert hugged Ned's shoulders tightly. "Together, we will create an opportunity for the kingdom to prosper, and let the stories of wise kings and famous ministers be passed down to future generations." Chapter 29. Important officials. Unable to bear the slow speed of the ship, Robert ordered the team to abandon the ship and take the speedboat of the kingdom fleet back first. The large group of people stayed at the famous battlefield, the mouth of the Trident River, for 3 days, waiting for the transport fleet to arrive at the dock of Salt Spring Town. Then they boarded the ship in batches to enter Crab Bay, turn around the Crab-Clawed Peninsula, and finally enter the Narrow Sea. As a newly crowned baroness and the prince's swordsmanship teacher, she was able to get her own position on the royal speedboat. The fleet's speedboat is a light ship with a narrow hull and dozens of oars. After they crossed the crab-clawed peninsula, their supplies were already tight, and they had to replenish at Dragonstone Island before they could continue to move forward. She once hoped to meet up with Sig here, but only through spiritual contact did she learn that Sig had returned to the north. She was very disappointed to pass by her beloved again. Myrcella saw her melancholy and asked about the situation again and again. The kind-hearted princess made her feel the warmth of friendship, and her depressed mood improved. On Dragonstone, Robert and Stannis, the Lord Admiral, had a very unpleasant argument. The two met only once and then ignored each other like strangers. On the 5th day after departure, the fleet approached the port of King's Landing. She was able to see the symbol of King's Landing and the symbol of the royal family overlooking the narrow sea, the Red Keep. The Red Keep was built of light red stone, with 7 huge iron-roofed drum towers standing around it. Thick walls surrounded the castle, with countless bunkers and battlements on the walls for archers to shoot. Thick stone guardrails, 4 feet high, protected the edge of the wall. She learned from the talkative and friendly Facnon that the Red Keep was the place of royal majesty, and the heads of traitors were usually inserted between the gatehouses and on the iron gums on the battlements of the wall. The wall had huge bronze doors and iron portcullises, as well as some narrow side doors. A cobblestone square was located in front of the huge outer fort. Behind the wall were many small inner courtyards, arched halls, covered bridges, barracks, cellars, and barns. The Red Keep was basically a small town that could hold out for a year or more without outside help. She had a good relationship with people and had heard other anecdotes about the Red Keep. For example, the Red Keep was the first fortress built by Aegon the Conqueror with mud and wood. After conquering the 7 kingdoms, he ordered a royal castle to be built on the basis of the fortress. The castle was finally completed during the reign of Maegor I. When it was built, the interior of the Red Keep was full of secret passages and hidden passages. In order to keep the secrets, Maegor I killed all the construction workers. Because of such a cruel thing, to this day, screams or sad wails can be heard from time to time in the dead of night. The horror story was really scary. Myrcella hid behind her, the fat boy Tommen turned under the table, and Joffrey curled his lips reluctantly, pretending to be unbelieving. Most of the rumors are true. From here, we can see the gray haze rising into the sky. She stretched out her hand and drew a line in the air. That is the resentment of the dead. The children's uneasy whispers were getting farther and farther away from her. She turned her head unexpectedly and saw the frightened pale face of the nun. The important ministers of King's Landing came to greet them. The scene was grand. With an annoyed expression, the king ordered the royal meeting to prepare for the prime minister's tournament and then left with his entourage. The queen had a gloomy face and glanced at her with ill intent. "Dear sword dancer, I still need to hear your opinion on the itinerary arrangements for the prince and princess." She spoke respectfully, but stared at her with the sharpest and most sinister eyes. The important ministers cast curious and strange attention. "Your Majesty, I have no objection to the arrangement of the princess and the little prince. Considering that I am the guard of Her Highness Myrcella, please allow me to accompany her back to the palace." As for His Highness Prince Joffrey, she followed Sig's instructions and said with an extremely cold expression and voice, "His Highness still has homework to do. He must complete today's training subjects and study the art of war before he can rest." Rather than her words, it is her attitude that caused a commotion. The queen left in silence, and the ministers kept a respectful distance from her. Violet felt the different atmosphere in King's Landing. "I'm hungry. Can someone give me some food?" Joffrey said resentfully. "This is really wrong, our good prince. I will have someone prepare some snacks for you." Duke Viserys, who exuded a special fragrance and had a delicate skin like a woman, quickly responded. His anxious expression and resentful eyes were just like a mother who was worried about her child's hunger. "No need." Violet saluted Wallace. "Your Highness, the prince has not yet completed today's homework. He cannot eat until he has swung a wooden sword 2,000 times and ridden a warhorse over 50 standard obstacles." Her eyes were firm, and Wallace looked curious. "So you're a sword dancer?" Wallace stretched out his soft hands to hold Violet's leather glove prosthesis. Even though that prosthesis had no sense of touch, she still felt that this person's hands were soft and boneless. "Please forgive me for interrupting your work. Although your Highness's homework is important, you can't be careless about your health." As he waved his hand, the servants brought the prepared snacks. "These things are handed over to you, sir. When the homework is finished, make sure your Highness fills his stomach." "I prefer to fill it now," Joffrey muttered weakly. Wallace passed by him silently and nodded. In response to the prince's request, he spread his hands and looked helpless. Autumn, the old man, wearing a bachelor's robe, with age spots all over his bald head and a few strands of sparse white hair hanging on both sides of his forehead, came forward tremblingly. "The prince's homework and studies are important, but education requires methods and methods. Violet silently counted the number of different types of metal pieces in the bachelor's necklace. From his long, snow-white beard flowing down to his chest, she knew his identity. He was Grand Maester Pycelle, who had served the Seven Kingdoms for 42 years. The prince's daily life is important. Violet had a certain sense of rejection towards this old man. There was something she hated about his characteristics, and she became more and more wary of him. But for your highness, the cultivation of good habits is more urgent. Your highness needs to develop the habit of being conscientious and hardworking. This is also what his majesty expects of me. Without waiting for the Grand Maester to have other opinions, she dragged Joffrey and strode away from the ministers. You are so impressive. Myrcella blinked her green eyes, her face full of admiration. Brother, you'd better develop the habit as soon as possible. What do you mean? When I have power in the future, Joffrey clutched his fists and was about to threaten. Before you have power, you must develop good habits. You will thank me then. Now practice immediately. She frowned. Joffrey turned around to ask for help, even pretending not to see the hound. With a mournful expression, the prince picked up the wooden sword and walked silently towards the parade ground. A short, average-sized, handsome man bowed to them as he passed by. He had a pair of great green eyes, a small tuft of beard on his chin, and some gray in his dark hair. This man must be very smart and cunning. Violet expressed her feelings to Myrcella frankly. He is the Minister of Finance, Lord Pedro Baelish, a real important official of the kingdom, and my father relies on him a lot. While eating the snacks provided by Viserys, Myrcella acted as a tour guide. If you want to know the list of heroes in King's Landing, I can tell you. Joffrey raised his head high, just like the queen. He approached Myrcella and reached out to touch the snack. Snap. The prince shrank his hand after being severely whipped. It's not for you. Finish the practice first. I can consider getting some black bread. If you do well, I'll add salted beef jerky as a reward. Why are you dawdling? Do you think the number of slashes will decrease by itself? I tell you, the longer you go, the more you will slash. From now on, your number of slashes will be increased to 4,000 per day. Everyone around cast a surprised and stunned look at her, and Myrcella was so surprised that she forgot to drop the snack. She reached out to catch the exquisite snack. Don't worry, dear princess, I will never do this to you. Boys need to be tempered to become useful. This is for his own good. In reality, she was referring to the instructor of the recruit training in another world. If it weren't for the elegance of the noble knights, she would have burst out with more crude and dirty words. You devil, 7 hells. Joffrey cried and ran to the parade ground. The new Prime Minister's team passed by, and Violet pulled Myrcella to salute. This will do a lot of good for the child. Thank you for helping Robert. Lord Stark thanked Violet sincerely, as if his own child was being educated. It's my duty. Violet also looked serious. She was amazed that such a boring person could become King Robert's close friend. Chapter 30 Dagger. Looking at the sky, a meteor streaked across the deep purple sky and fell to the dark horizon. This was an ominous sign. Sig always sneered at the charlatans. They didn't understand the power of mysterious existence, nor did they understand the complexity of energy exchange in the world. Just praying could stir up what was happening, and relying on faith to move the gods. What kind of idiot would believe that these simple actions would lead to success? He left the Black Castle and crossed the Wolf Forest to the south. His destination was Winterfell. The layout worked, and the existing process of the world had undergone unimaginable changes. He didn't want the change to be so drastic, so he went there in person to reconnect the broken chain. He hoped that at least the chain would not break now. He himself was a real anomaly. Even if he did nothing, his existence alone was enough to shape the foundation of the world's cycle. He was very clear about his destructive power. His existence alone was like hot oil invading the snow, opening up a destructive path. For this reason, he had to be careful. In order to achieve his goal, the first thing to do was not to destroy the world, but to maintain the stability of the world. What irony, he sighed and exhaled like mist. The weather is getting colder and colder. The long summer is over and winter is coming. Winter City is in a state of depression. The influence of the royal family's visit and the Prime Minister's long journey has not subsided. Laziness and silence permeate everywhere. Even the soldiers guarding the city are not so strict. The Stark family is strict in military discipline. No one dared to be so blatantly lazy in the past. A black cloak covered his appearance. He restrained his breath, just like a wandering mercenary rider. You can go to the recruitment office. We are short of manpower. The guard had a distinct southern accent and was also new. Sig handed over a copper coin skillfully. The soldier hesitated for a moment and took it. Except for the Lord's castle, other places are empty. You'll be disappointed if you want to have fun. The top girl here is very expensive. Don't expect to hover even for one night with a soldier's commission. The guard said and summarized the information for the copper coin. Thank you, brother. He looked at the empty streets of Winter City. The castle was dyed gray, and the fog of time and space represented anomalies and an uncertain future. What he had to do was to study carefully, find out where the problem was, and fix the error in the best way he could. The crow cried shrilly. Sig looked in the direction of the sound, and a strange three-eyed crow stared at him. He squinted his eyes, and the crow disappeared in the thick smoke. It's on fire. Hurry up and put out the fire. The sound of alarm bells and knocking on wooden boards spread throughout the city. People searched, and strong men carrying various utensils ran towards the library tower. After a while, soldiers appeared. Under the guidance of the officers, they carried water jars and shouted slogans and rushed to the fire. The bright orange color illuminated the castle, and the dazzling brilliance of the flames dyed the gray sky red. This fire was not an anomaly. He looked back in the direction of the castle, and the gray became thicker and smaller, focusing on a small tower. He no longer hesitated, regardless of the fact that everyone was watching him on the street. He left his horse where it was, soared into the sky, and leapt towards the small tower. He jumped onto the low wall, and with the help of the guard tower's parapet, he leapt to the higher roof, quickly climbed to the top of the slope, and almost without hesitation, he slid down directly, and halfway through, he used his 2 feet to accurately pass the guard who was ringing the alarm bell. He saw the figure in the tower. Lady Stark was entangled with someone, and the smell of blood was overflowing. Lady Stark must not be allowed to die, at least not now. He jumped and ran desperately. His speed and agility far exceeded that of normal people, even faster than the crows flying over the roof, and scared a few beasts to stop on the chimney. Look what that is. 7 gods, is he a devil? White Walker. Finally someone found him. As he approached the tower, wolves howled continuously. Sig knew the little dire wolf through Violet's eyes. The wolf squatting under the tower and barking was Bran's wolf. For some reason, Bran did not give the little guy a name. Following the wolf's line of sight, he saw the closed wooden door. The gray was the thickest in that direction, almost reaching the level of black. The screams of women, the smell of blood, and the sound of furniture falling mixed into the notes of human struggle. Sig suppressed the urge to intervene in the battle in the tower and ran straight to the wooden door. The impact smashed the wooden door into pieces. Through the thick black fog, he saw the killer holding a dagger made of Valyrian steel. As the source of history, the gray space-time energy around the dagger was as black as ink. A trace of suspicion flashed in the golden eyes, and then the little wolf no longer hesitated and rushed into the tower with a low roar. After a few breaths, a man's scream came from the tower, followed by the sound of a human body rolling on the floor. The ink color disappeared. The noise of firefighting continued, and a group of soldiers were rushing back. Sig was about to leave when he noticed the figure of a huge giant a few meters away. Hoder. The giant scratched his head in a friendly manner, as if to thank him for his help. Sig smiled at him, then used his greatest strength to leap out of the open space in front of the tower. There were frantic footsteps in the alley, and out of the corner of his eye he saw soldiers running frantically, their helmets reflecting under the torches. The whole city of Winterfell was on alert. Sig was worried whether the abnormality would happen again, so he stayed to observe the situation. He controlled the crows to get information, and learned that the fire in the library tower was man-made, and the killer deliberately led everyone away in order to assassinate Bran. The Duchess did not leave, and ran into the killer. The murderer cruelly planned to kill the mother and son together, but failed unexpectedly because of the participation of the direwolf. What was left at the scene was a corpse with a bitten neck and a dagger made of Valyrian steel. Through the eyes of the crow, he observed the dagger and saw the flow of the world situation and the surging rolling of the wheel of history. The dagger was a key item, and he took great pains to resist taking the handle of the dagger for himself. In less than a few days, the martial law was lifted, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief, except for the people of the Stark family. The dagger was working, and Lady Stark was shrouded in grey mist. He left Winter City and walked towards the nearest port. He had to be prepared. If he really wanted to intervene in the historical trend of this world, Lady Stark's actions would be the best starting point. The question was how he could embed himself into the event. He had to appear in the event naturally without leaving any traces, so as not to attract the attention of the world. He had suffered from ostentation, not that the world could do anything to him, but the key was that his goal could not be achieved. Half a month later, a father and daughter appeared on horseback in White Harbor, south of Winter City. The father was sturdy and had a majestic white beard, and the daughter had elegant manners and sharp eyes. If they had not traveled light, people would have thought that the two were nobles traveling. "Respected sir and madam, you need guards, please hire me." Sig suddenly appeared in front of the two horses, and he almost scared his daughter's horse. Get out. We don't need guards. The father pressed his sword with his hand, full of majesty. Sig raised his head and showed his face. He changed his silver hair to black, and his purple eyes gradually turned into light blue. His handsomeness surprised the daughter and made the father suspicious. Dear Lady Stark and Sir Rodriguez, a good guard is enough to ensure the safety and smoothness of your secret trip. The two looked flustered, and he bowed and saluted. Please rest assured, madam, I am the only one who recognized you. If you hire me, the entire trip will not be disturbed by others. Chapter 31 Sword Dance Princess Myrcella woke up in the morning light and couldn't wait to tidy up her clothes. Next to her was a dress with intricate patterns. Almost the entire Casterly rock was embroidered on it. If it were in the past, she would definitely choose this dress first, which was the best foil for the beauty and elegance of a royal lady. During this period, she seemed to have suddenly woken up from a dream and lost interest in the past. She still liked flowers, crafts and beautiful things, and she still couldn't move when she saw a handsome knight, but she was more concerned about riding, rapiers and the heroic Violet. She was fascinated by this heroic and unique woman. She was impressed by her spirit and looked forward to becoming as free and heroic as her one day. Myrcella neglected all her latest lessons and asked Violet to teach him the skills of rapiers in her spare time when she was teaching her brother swordsmanship. The nun was very dissatisfied with this and complained to her mother several times, but her mother could do nothing. She had never been pleasing to her father. When it came to education, her father cared more about the opinions of sword dancers. Being able to escape from the monotonous embroidery and etiquette classes made her look forward to every new day. Polterman, the fat boy, also wanted to join them, but he was too young to ride his horse, and he needed to learn to read and write. Violet had no way to deal with this. She sent Timon, who had skipped school, back to the monks several times. Timon, who looked like a pitiful abandoned puppy, made people feel sad, so Myrcella chose to ignore him. Your Highness, fighting and killing are boys' things. Do you want to learn from Arya of the Stark family? The nun saw her coming out in a riding leather coat and couldn't help but scold her sharply. I just found out what I like. You will see the birth of a new generation of barons in the future. She made a face at the angry nun, and even she felt that this action was like Arya. At the door of the palace, her mare had been prepared. She jumped onto the saddle skillfully, the hooves tipped, the morning breeze blew her hair, and she felt the breath of spring comfortably. After walking a short distance, she came to the training ground, and heard Violet scolding. It was really strange. Violet was only 2 years older than her, and was petite and pretty, especially her sapphire-like eyes, which seemed to be able to emit light at any time. But once such a lovely girl was on the training ground, she became a different person, saying all kinds of swear words, and her scolding reached a certain level. Your Highness, the blonde and blue-eyed prince, why can't you even deal with a little girl? You have brought shame to the royal family. If you still can't stand up, do you need me to plead with your father to send you to the wall? Violet's eyes were as cold as a sword, and her words were as fierce as a knife. The brother's face flushed red. He shouted and rushed towards his petite opponent. He turned gracefully and swung the wooden sword steadily, fiercely and accurately. He dropped the wooden sword in pain and ran away. That's it, useless thing. Don't call yourself a little lion anymore. Even calling you a lion dog is an insult to dogs. The guards couldn't help laughing, but fell silent under her brother's resentful gaze. Myrcella noticed that the hound was among them. This guy was full of murderous intent on weekdays, and looked like a loyal lackey of her brother. She thought he would stand up for her brother, but now it seems that she thought too much. Children, come and eat. For the sake of the 7 gods, we have to add burden to the king's kitchen. You can't fight on the battlefield, but at least you can take away the gold coins in the king's pocket. Violet's words caused another round of laughter. The servants brought a simple but filling breakfast, including her brother, Arya, and the guards. What surprised Myrcella was that her brother, who had always disdained to eat with servants, also obediently mixed in the crowd and ate the freshly baked bread, as if he was afraid that it would be snatched away by others. He's really afraid of being robbed of his breakfast. Violet answered Myrcella's unspoken question. She walked slowly and gracefully, wiping our sweat with a soft cotton cloth. I set a time limit for eating, and it must be done with his men. If you miss it or someone gets there first, even the prince will have to go hungry. Myrcella looked at the people who were eating voraciously with curiosity. Did you let your brother go hungry? Yeah, I didn't starve him too many times. The one who robbed his breakfast the most was Santa Cleggan. There's no time to be pretentious these days. We have to fight for breakfast. Violet didn't have a big appetite. She just tore a small piece of bread and threw it into her mouth, elegant and calm. Seeing everyone eating so deliciously, Myrcella's stomach growled, and she realized that she had forgotten to eat breakfast. She blushed and was stuffed with bread and hard-baked bacon by Violet. These things are not as delicious as what you usually eat, but they are very fragrant. Don't worry about eating them. They won't upset your stomach. Soon, Violet asked the servants to take away the breakfast, and the Hound took the lead to drive Joffrey off the table. Why are you targeting me? Her brother shrugged his shoulders, lowered his body, and roared more frighteningly than before. The guards were finally scared and stood up one after another. The servants were trembling with fear, and the unfinished breakfast was scattered all over the floor. Ah! The cute little prince is finally angry. Violet looked hateful and confident. It's you who was targeted. Who made you a prince? She drew the sword at her waist. Her brother leaned back, his arrogance gone. It's not easy to be the crown prince. You are responsible for the future protector of the 7 kingdoms. If you don't have some skills, who will obey you and who can you protect? Her words were like a sharp sword. Myrcella swore in her heart that Violet was the most stylish woman she had ever seen. The arrogant and stubborn brother scratched his head, his mouth cracked. Ha, master, why are you so serious? It's just breakfast. I'll eat faster next time. Scratching his head, he returned to the training ground, walk 100 steps after dinner. There is still training to do. Training. He actually started training spontaneously. Myrcella shyly rubbed against Violet. Although she had always been gentle to her, she was afraid of her momentum in that training ground. Dear little Wa, can you teach me to stab? I want to. She lowered her head, blushed, and bit her lips. I want to be like you. A new day, Myrcella quickly put on a light leather coat and ran to the stable before the nuns and maids got up. The stable boy who unexpectedly saw her opened his mouth in surprise. Don't talk nonsense, I'm busy, prepare the horse. Enduring the stench in the stable, she repeated in her mind, I want to be like her, I want to be like her. The mare was ready, she jumped on the horse, I will go out at this time every day in the future, remember to prepare the horse early. Without waiting for a response, she had already galloped away. The training ground was in full swing. Because of the prince's daily morning exercises, the nobles sent their children to the training ground. Myrcella guessed that they wanted to be close to her brother, not because they were interested in Violet's swordsmanship. She passed by everyone in a leather coat, causing constant surprise and astonishment. You're here, the training is not easy. Violet said with a smile. Myrcella looked at Joffrey, who was sweating profusely on the training ground. If my brother can do it, so can I. Violet's smile became even wider. Of course we should treat them differently. There are differences between men and women. But don't worry, he is very stupid. It won't be too difficult to surpass him. Taking the slightly heavy wooden sword thrown by Violet, Myrcella took a sideways posture to meet the attack. Chapter 32 Catelyn arrives in King's Landing. The captain of the Braavosi ordered the sailors to row harder. Catelyn told Sigurd to tell the captain that as long as they arrived at King's Landing smoothly, not only would he get a generous reward, but each sailor would also get a silver wolf as a reward. Madam is really generous. The captain thanks you on behalf of the sailors. Sigurd replied with a smile. Lady Stark stared at him coldly. Do you think I'm a fool? Of course I know what the captain will do, so I will hand over the silver wolf to the sailors in person. Sigurd pouted habitually. Lady Stark frowned in dissatisfaction. He had no obligation to please her. He left her behind and walked steadily on the deck as if walking on flat ground, confirming the position of the sun in the direction of the ship. The Braavosi were the best sailors. He was not worried that the ship would not be able to deliver them to King's Landing, but that the Braavosi, who were born merchants, would sell them. The course was confirmed by the water ripples in the sky. Leaving behind the distrustful and arrogant Lady Stark, he walked past Sir Roderick who was holding the auxiliary mast. The old lord had lost his proud beard, and he was seasick and unable to take care of his beard. In the end, he could only let the sailor shave that clump of vomit sticking to it with a razor. The old lord looked at him helplessly, and then continued to hold the mast. Sigurd had no doubt that if he continued to sail, this loyal and capable coach of Winter City would be handed over on the ship. It's less than a day's voyage from here to King's Landing. You also know how to sail. Do you want to help me? The shrewd Braavos captain smiled at him. That was the unique look and smile of a merchant who was evaluating the goods. I'm curious about the price offered by the captain. Sig stood in the wind. He could see through the fog on the sea and even the boundaries of time and space. In the direction of King's Landing, gray-black fog rose into the sky. Ordinary people could not see these phenomena that represented the changes in the world process. My dear brother, you are a decisive man. Come to me, 15 silver wolves per voyage, food and accommodation included. How about it? If you encounter pirates or natural disasters, you can get an extra 5 silver wolves as a special allowance after surviving. Staring at the captain for a while, the short Baratheon man tilted his head in surprise. Captain, I'm asking about the price of the information. You and I both know that this lady is trying to hide her whereabouts. The poor old knight must have paid hush money for this. He narrowed his eyes, and the captain looked away unnaturally. What is the price for the lady's whereabouts? 1 gold royal. From the captain's rolling eyes and his right hand that subconsciously stroked his chin, he concluded, 10 gold royals, or even more. Who was your buyer? Octopus Eunuch or the finance minister Earl Baelish? Or, you don't care who it is, as long as you can afford that price, it's all right. Faint sweat marks appeared on the captain's collar. The wind blew, and the narrow clipper was like a toy in the hands of a giant, thrown into the air and fell into the trough of the waves. Even the most experienced sailors could not bear it. They had to grab everything they could grab and wait for the storm to pass. Sig stood alone on the deck, letting the waves hit him, sticking to the deck like a nail, looking towards the direction of King's Landing. The port of King's Landing was lined with merchant ships and warships. After paying a hefty port entry fee, the Baratheon clipper was allowed to enter. Seeing the captain's pained look, he would definitely ask for compensation afterwards. Sig jumped onto the dock faster than a sailor who was tying the boat, and came to the fixed pile with a thick rope. Everyone on the dock was looking at him. The clipper can be called light and slender, but it is not a raft. Normally, it takes several strong sailors to work together to fix it to the dock or barge. In order to save time, Sig did the work of several people alone without the patience to wait for the sailors to dawdle, and forcibly grabbed the clipper and tied the rope with a quick hand. Please be merciful, dear Sig. If you are willing to work on the ship, I will pay you double, no, triple the wages. The captain pushed the clumsy sailor away, left the guest behind, and jumped onto the dock second. My offer's not bad. He shook off the hand of the dock mooring worker fiercely. Stay aside. Just because you're dawdling, the guests have to tie them during themselves. Have you ever seen an mooring worker who lets the guests tie them during themselves? You didn't do a good job, so don't even think about taking a penny from me. The captain seemed to have selective amnesia as to whether the money should be transferred to the actual workers. Think about it, no one will be more generous than me. The gangway was laid, and Lady Stark stepped steadily and gracefully off the ship. She didn't even need the help of the sailors. Sir Atreides, impatient, staggered back to the land. His pale face was unbearable. Respected captain, this is a punctual trip. Lady Stark looked at the old knight and seemed to swallow the rest of her words. She took out a small cloth bag and counted dozens of gold wolves and put them in the captain's hand. The captain turned into a smiling flower. Now it's time to fulfill your promise. Lady Stark smiled in the direction of the sailors. I will give each of them a silver wolf. The captain rubbed his hands. Respected madam, I am sure you will keep your word. But for the sake of the sailors, I can keep it for them. The lady glanced at him. I would rather see the silver wolf handed over to them. This is what they deserve. She said arrogantly. So you're giving him a reason to resell the intelligence. Sig did not say it out loud. He thought that Catelyn Stark's behavior was unwise, but it seemed quite troublesome to convince the arrogant Duchess. My dear lady, I hope you understand that everything is for the good of the sailors. If we hand the money to them now, there will be nothing left in the evening. Most of it will go into the pockets of barmaids, casino owners or prostitutes. I will keep it for them. I swear in the name of my mother that I will give them all the silver wolves. No, Captain, I will do it myself. The Duchess said word by word. The captain did not insist anymore, and did not even show a frustrated expression. He bowed deeply, then said a few words to the first mate of the clipper, and disappeared into the crowd at the dock. She was a saint who scattered money, and she was like a saint in the sailors' thousands of thanks. Sid came to the old knight and said, I bet that the captain is trying hard to sell these silver wolves in the market. What are you selling? The old knight looked wooden. Sid sighed in his heart. The so-called fate really exists, and behind it is the root disaster. But human beings themselves, aren't they part of fate? This was the most difficult part of breaking the cycle of hell. No matter if they were noble or humble, each individual had their own original sin, which would affect their future. It was extremely difficult to persuade people to break their predetermined fate through persuasion and education. There is nothing to sell. He gave up persuading. The first thing we need to do is to find a suitable hotel. As the two talked, Lady Stark came to them, and 4 sailors followed her with hunched bags. We have arrived safely at King's Landing. Now there is only one problem. Respected and brave Mr. Sig, thank you for your help along the way. This is what you deserve. Lady Stark stared at him with undisguised contempt and threw 5 gold wolves. Sig noticed the sailors behind him and followed the gold wolves with his eyes. 2 more than we agreed on. It's hush money. I need you to keep my arrival in King's Landing a secret, if you still believe in honor. Lady Stark looked displeased, as if saying one more word would be an insult. In order to keep it secret, I'm afraid we need to catch up with our beloved captain. You just refuse to let him keep the Silver Wolves. I'm sure the captain will look for other sources of income to make up for his losses. Sig said slowly, he had no intention of leaving. The sailors deserve the money, why should he lose it? Lady Stark said sternly. Shrugging her shoulders and spreading her hands, my dear lady, I'm afraid the Bravos people regard the sailors as their own property. You insist on paying the sailors to squander the money, which he thinks is a waste of the silver wolves that belong to him. Sig's opinion is right. The old knight finally had some color on his face, and he frowned and interrupted. Lady Stark lowered her head and calculated, the aid recommended by the captain is no longer available. She turned back to confirm that the 4 sailors were still there. We still need to hire more people to move the gifts. Sorry, ma'am, I'm so useless. The old knight looked sad. Sig opened his arms and made a gesture of embracing everything. So you need a reliable person, like me. His smile was meaningful. Of course I will charge the necessary fee, but I can guarantee that the price is absolutely fair. Chapter 33 Spiderweb. No, let's stay in the hotel he introduced. I want to see who he will sell us to. Mrs. Stark said angrily, as for you, you can stay with me for a while. That will prove that you are just a gangster with a little bit of cleverness. Sig shrugged his shoulders, shut his mouth, and concentrated on his job as a guard. The hotel is not far from the dock, on a gentle slope overlooking the beautiful scenery of the harbor. Without considering the problem of information leakage, this is indeed a good place to stay. It is said that the proprietress here has excellent cooking skills. The hotel is the best braised beef south of Gin's and the second best clam soup in the narrow sea. Sig arranged food and accommodation for the 2 and looked forward to the arrival of dinner. He felt a strange gaze. There were passing merchants, hawkers passing by, beggars on the street, and children playing. Ordinary people would not notice it. Intelligence experts can only distinguish a few of them. It can be said that there are very few people like him who can see through the slightest details and even think about problems from the perspective of surveillance. He observed the surroundings calmly. He found that the fat cook and maid of the hotel were both surveillance. He would not remind the Duchess and the old knight. With his understanding of human nature and human heart, they would never admit it, even if they were definitely wrong. When they rejected his kindness for the first time, they lost the biggest guarantee of this trip, secrecy. The seasickness that Sir Rodriguez endured was in vain. He noticed that the old knight exchanged glances with the Duchess, obviously being wary of him. The old knight left, and Sig was about to leave. Aren't you curious about where Sir Rodriguez is going and what he is doing? Catelyn asked. I'm waiting for your patience to run out. It seems that you are more impatient than I thought. He didn't use honorifics, and Catelyn's face changed slightly. Catelyn's face showed vicissitudes. Considering our young age and her status as a lady, she looked a little old. He has always been soft-hearted towards women, let alone a beautiful woman. He swallowed back the harsh words that were on his lips. It doesn't matter where the old knight goes, the key is that you're here. Wait, and you will know the result soon. Under Catelyn's cautious gaze, he closed the door. The maidservant who was spying was still nearby. He threw a copper coin. Dear, can you ask the kitchen for an accommodation? I'm a little hungry. I hope to have a bottle of wine and a pile of side dishes, preferably be raised by the boss lady herself. The maidservant's eyes lit up when she received the copper coin. Everything else is fine, but there's not much beef left. After taking a silver wolf from Sig, she smiled. My dear, I just remembered that there was some left yesterday. Although it's not as delicious as fresh ones, it's still delicious. After getting his consent, the maidservant ran back to the kitchen happily. He found a seat by the window in the empty restaurant, while enjoying the busyness of King's Landing port, waiting for the inevitable result. He deliberately turned sideways and faced the stairs, just to see the expression on Catelyn's face when she came down the stairs. It's not that he is narrow-minded. After seeing too many things, nothing in life can move him. The simple little things in life make him miss the days when he was still an ordinary person. The Golden Road city guard broke into the inn and almost knocked down the maidservant who was carrying food and drinks. Dear sirs, what brings you here? The lady boss, whose face was covered with pockmarks, ran out like the wind, looking terrified. She stole a glance in the direction of Sig. We are looking for the 3 people who just moved in, one of whom is a noble lady. The Golden Road was surprisingly friendly. Without waiting for the lady boss to speak, Sig snapped his fingers to attract the Golden Road's attention. Dear sirs, the lady is changing her clothes. I suggest you wait a while and go to the luxury suite on the 2nd floor to find her. The captain of the guard saluted him as if he was addressing the knight. Sig accepted the attention of the lady boss and the maid calmly. He pushed the food tray forward. "Madam Boss, I need clam soup and fresh beef, and some snacks for the golden robes. They will be charged with the suite on the second floor." The lady boss looked terrified and retreated repeatedly with apologies. The golden robes were very obedient and waited for about a quarter of an hour before going upstairs. The surrounding surveillance network had twice as many people as when it started. As footsteps sounded, he deliberately put on a half-sarcastic expression and stared at the stairs until Catelyn appeared. She looked confused, annoyed and a little frustrated. He admired this woman for not panicking when she saw such a scene. The education of the Tully family was indeed extraordinary. "My dear lady, when the knight comes back later, I will tell him that you have an appointment and went out first." Catelyn had a cold face and left with the gold robes angrily. Sid continued to stay at the window where he could see the scenery and enjoy his lunch alone. Most of the surveillance network was withdrawn. Sid used the method of consciousness transmission to contact Violet and learn that she was in the parade ground. After eating and drinking, he did not stay to wait for the old knight as he claimed, but used his footwork and superhuman perception to get rid of the surveillance sentry in the alleys around the hotel and quickly rushed to the parade ground. The royal parade ground is not accessible to ordinary people. In order to reunite with Violet, he took some time to disguise himself as a squire of a noble knight, hiding from the golden cloak guards and the guards of the parade ground. This place has become a playground for noble children. In addition to the gorgeously dressed young masters and ladies, a large number of servants are scattered around the parade ground. The chaos covered him to blend into the crowd. Violet was teaching Prince Joffrey the correct blocking posture. After he gave the agreed signal, she withdrew from the parade ground. The two met in a nearby stable. "Sig, it's great to see you again." Violet rushed up desperately and hugged him tightly. The horse stared at the two of them with side eyes and ate grass leisurely. "The smell here is not good. I should have asked you to go to the dock earlier. The scenery here is unique and the food is delicious." He hugged the petite person in his arms, and he felt like hugging his daughter. It's really strange. He has never been married and has no daughter, but he feels like a father. "It doesn't matter. As long as I can see you and be with you, nothing else matters." Without the majesty of the strip teacher and the heroic spirit of the sword dancing lady, there is only a girl who needs to be protected. "Thank you for Brand's fall. It was not my intention to hurt you." He ruffled her hair. "It doesn't matter. As long as you expect, I will do it with my life," she said without hesitation. "Nothing can be compared with your life." Sig patted her back and comforted her. "There will be a series of events in the future. Since you have an official identity, it depends on you to complete it. Let's keep in touch and don't force yourself." It was past dinner time when he returned to the inn. He recalled the warm scenes. Due to the time travel, fixed events and places have lost their meaning to him, and he also lost a sense of belonging. On the contrary, with Violet by his side, he felt the warmth of home that he had not seen for a long time. "Going to report to your master. What if I have important actions during this period?" Catelyn, who was drinking with the old knight in the restaurant, said sarcastically. "I am my own master. I don't need to report my work. I want to see a beautiful and lovely lady to comfort her lonely heart." His truth was met with Catelyn's sneer and the old knight's angry return. "What, am I wrong? It's no secret that you came to King's Landing. Let me guess who was the first to know about your arrival. It should be the Duke of Wallace, known as the Octopus." "You are right, it's him." She had an expression that was very annoying, but she had to admit it. "Whose are you?" "I am my own person. As you can see, I am a mercenary, looking forward to making enough money from you, my big customer." What he said was not all lies. At least the activity funds in this world depend on Catelyn's generosity. "This is yours, take it." Catelyn threw 5 golden wolves. "You can leave now." "I don't need you," she said coldly. Cooperating with Catelyn, Sir Rodriguez moved his chair forward to stand between him and Catelyn. "You heard me, you have nothing to do here. We no longer need mercenaries." "No, you do." He did not back down, but pulled a chair and sat down. The old knight's nose was almost touching his face. "Old man, do you think you can protect your lady by yourself? If you really have the ability, how did the gold cloaks find her today?" He spoke to the old knight, but his eyes were looking at Catelyn. "King's Landing is a huge spider web. Anyone who breaks in without preparation will become the food of a spider called all-out game, and I can protect you from being eaten by the spider." Chapter 34. Sword Dance Contest. "Get out. I don't need and won't hire you." Catelyn's eyes were as cold as frost, just like the snow in the north. "Please leave, we don't welcome you." Sir Rodriguez stood in front of Catelyn. Without a beard, he felt less oppressive than when he was in Winterfell. Sigurd bowed and left obediently. When he walked to the door, he seemed to suddenly remember, Violet asked me to go to the Stark's castle to visit a poor little guy named Bran, hoping that I could cure his disability. Since you don't welcome me, I can only forget it. The Duchess's prophecy stopped again. After leaving the hotel, Sigurd got busy. Previously, he had a clear view of the complex and entangled situation in Dragonstone after communicating with Stannis, but some things still needed to be seen with his own eyes to judge. With the funds provided by Catelyn, things went much more smoothly. He first found an inconspicuous place for himself to live, and then visited everywhere with the inn as the center. Robert's illegitimate children, Lord Baelish's brothel, Varys' intelligence base, the distribution of Lannister's troops, important figures of the royal family in King's Landing, etc. Even if you have superhuman senses, it is not so easy to grasp the overall situation. Getting up early and returning late all day, the situation of the political and economic center of the Seven Kingdoms has formed a concrete concept in his mind, and it has been continuously detailed as the intelligence has become rich. During this period, an important event in King's Landing has become the focus of people's discussion on the streets. More and more foreign nobles, free knights, mercenaries and all kinds of people are pouring into King's Landing. The Prime Minister's tournament is about to be held. I learned from Violet that Duke Stark, the nominal initiator of the tournament, is opposed to activities that increase the burden on the treasury. But it seems that everyone in King's Landing, except him, is looking forward to the arrival of the tournament. Seed wants a legal identity to sneak into the tournament, so he finds Violet to see if she has any ideas. You plan to let the prince participate in the tournament. He's only a teenager, not an adult. Violet actually had her own ideas, which was rare. Most of the time, she was an executor and basically did not express her opinions on the direction of progress. Yes, sorry, I don't mean to interfere with you. If you think it's inappropriate, I will stop it immediately. Violet blushed, like a child who had done something wrong. He ruffled her hair. No, it's not a big deal. What we are doing at this stage is to disrupt the situation. This is good. Prince Joffrey on the parade ground is very different from the proud, weak, and violent boy a few months ago. His skin is dark and he is leaner. He is like a spear, upright and full of sharpness. His every move is the style of his uncle, Jaime Lannister. What surprised him was Princess Myrcella. The delicate lady in the deep palace, holding a rapier, with elegant movements and a graceful figure, seems to have some of Violet's style when fighting. The original greenhouse flower has grown rapidly and has changed more than her brother. Does the queen have any objections? He was satisfied with Violet's results. However, it was difficult to predict the queen's reaction. Even though he had seen through people's hearts and had seen countless personalities, he still had no idea how the situation would change. It was good to be able to disrupt the situation, but he did not want to see a situation that was out of control. The woman of the Lannister family hates me very much. You can see it from her murderous eyes. Violet was relaxed and did not take the queen's hostility to heart. King Robert praised my educational achievements. He even admitted that more than 10 years of education was not as good as my 1 month of training. For this reason, he also conferred me the title of Baron and gave me the surname Baratheon. Violet Baratheon, it sounds good. On her riding clothes, there was an emblem of a crowned stag embroidered on her chest. Sig studied it carefully and thought that the emblem was very suitable for her. The formal identity is no problem. As a baron, I could have my own squire knight. Come to my house to work, the treatment is good. Violet blinked happily, her cheeks flushed, cute and innocent. Sig immediately knelt on one knee. My life belongs to you, and I will go through fire and water for you. The two laughed until they attracted the attention of the servants. By the way, I didn't see Arya. I thought she would ask you for advice. The long-faced girl in his memory, who was more naughty than the boy, was entangled with as much grey mist as Prince Joffrey. At least she was a key figure who could drive history forward. She is very stubborn. After losing to Joffrey once, she decided to prove herself with her strength. It is said that the Prime Minister found a dance teacher for her, and she is practicing hard in the Prime Minister's tower. Violet talked to him and yelled from time to time to correct the postures of the boys and girls in the training ground. Dancing teacher. Sig was rarely surprised by certain things, but he was not omniscient in details. Sometimes, he still felt the gap between himself and the gods, and he would never expand to the point of thinking that he could do everything. Syrio Forel, a Bralos man, the chief swordsman of the Sea King. Violet showed a strange expression. He must be an ordinary person, without the grey mist, but he confined me to a draw. It is incredible that an ordinary person can reach such a height. The Prime Minister's tower is the second most serious building in the Red Castle. As a squire of the Baratheon family, Sig changed into a light riding suit embroidered with a crown and stag emblem. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, he changed the color of his hair and eyes. A young and handsome knight was born. From the rate of passers-by turning their heads, we can see how outstanding his appearance is. Explain the purpose of the visit to the guard, report the name of Violet, and enter the interior of the Red Castle smoothly. According to the guard's reminder, Miss Arya's dance class is mostly held in a small hall on the side building overlooking the sea. Left, right, up, center. Before I even reached the small hall, I heard the little girl's screams of pain in the common language preaching with a strange accent. "You're already dead. You're cheating. You can yell, why did you poke my stomach?" Arya's voice came angrily. Turning the corner, the view in front of me suddenly opened up. The busy scene of King's Landing dock can be seen at the entrance of the small hall. A short, thin, bald man with a hooked nose held a wooden sword against Arya's chin. "Every failure is the best lesson. You're too naive to listen to your opponent." With a thick accent, the man hit Arya's head with a wooden sword. The angry little girl quickly retreated, and the two of them were ready to compete again. "Excuse me, both of you." Sig looked up and down at the chief swordsman of the Sea King. Violet was right, he was an ordinary person. An idea came to my mind, but whether it could be implemented required further understanding of the man. The Baratheon looked up at him, with an attitude that was proud but not annoying. On the other side, Arya kept rubbing our shoulders, arms and stomach. Her grin made people want to laugh. "What's the matter?" the little man said impatiently. "We are busy." Sig made an apologetic gesture. "This must be the Prime Minister's son, really? I'm a girl." Arya shook her fist in protest. "I am Violet Squire Knight. I heard that there's a man named Syrio who was quite good and can go 2 or 3 rounds under her." He deliberately exaggerated Violet's description. "The master is very powerful. He gave Violet face because she is a girl." Arya interrupted and shouted. Syrio didn't react much. He looked Sig up and down. "She didn't send you here to become my disciple. My lord believes that King's Landing only needs someone with the title of Sword Dance. She asked me to tell you that she hopes you can declare that you give up the title of Sword Dance. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelas. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35. Martial Arts Tournament, Part 1. Syrio rolled his eyes and carefully examined Sigurd. The two of them circled each other. "Little brother, you are lying." The accent of the Baratheon people, even with the most serious attitude, has an inexplicable sense of humor. The sword dancer would not say that. She is a lovely girl who values honor and not fame. Sigurd raised his eyebrows unexpectedly. The Baratheon people are indeed as Violet described, with insights beyond the ordinary, but he is an ordinary person. He likes such ordinary people. In his ideal world, gods will not interfere with the development of the world or even the race. Ordinary people can become leaders. Human beings do not rely on the favor of gods, but on their own abilities to move forward. Syrio is exactly the kind of person he has been looking for and admiring. You are right, Baratheon. Sword dancers don't do that, but I do. She is a sword dancer, and you use water dance swordplay. The only one who was related to sword and dance is Violet. Please go back and tell your Sea King that Baratheon can no longer refer to swordplay as water dance. Only Violet has this privilege. He spoke nonsense and was very good at provoking. Syrio waved the wooden sword in his hand. His posture was as graceful as dancing. "Little brother, the world believes in strength rather than words. Since you have your persistence, we Baratheon also have our own will." The wooden sword pointed directly at the tip of Sig's nose. The short swordsman finally took the bait. "Come on, Syrio, beat him to a pulp." Arya cheered for her master. Sig casually hooked the wooden sword on the ground with his foot. The practice sword filled with lead water is heavier than the real sword. Face the enemy sideways, swift as a deer, quiet as a shadow, quick as a snake, still as water, strong as a bear, fierce as a wolf, immovable as a stone. He made the same pose as Syrio, and after a set of formulas, after images were left everywhere in the small hall, and the air was whistling. Syrio was so surprised that he couldn't close his mouth. The forehead of the small swordsman was covered with beads of sweat. The kingdom's martial arts competition is a grand event for nobles and knights to compete for honor, and it is also an activity for common people to temporarily forget their sorrows. Since the time of the Mad King, when Tywin Lannister was in power as Prime Minister, he specially convened martial arts competitions to relieve domestic pressure, and the tradition has continued to this day. The martial arts competition is divided into 3 parts. Individual, team and archery. The individual competition is divided into two stages. The Knight Spear competition is the first stage, and the second stage of the sword duel on foot determines the champion. The team competition is a high-intensity battle formation confrontation. The infantry and knights wearing heavy armor confront each other in a specified number. The competition is about the commander's on-the-spot response and the effectiveness of the soldier's formation. Archery competition is the simplest, with a score in form of shooting at a target at a certain distance, and the one with the highest score is the champion. The tournament has 4 grand prizes, among which the individual champion will receive 40,000 gold dragons, the runner-up will receive 20,000 gold dragons, and the team champion and the archery champion will each receive 10,000 gold dragons. The generous rewards have attracted many people who are not just fighting for honor to the tournament, including downtrodden nobles, mercenaries who are greedy for money, and even killers. Sig also heard that due to poor management and over-reliance on the tournament to maintain political stability, the treasury controlled by the royal family has actually gone bankrupt, with a debt of 6 million gold dragons, of which 3 million gold dragons are owed to the Lannister family. It is conceivable how powerful the Lannister family, who is the support of the queen and the court and is the big money bug of the royal family, is. On the day of the competition, people were transferred, and the major families and even the royal family set up tents in a special camp. The camp was more than 10 miles long. Looking from the Red Castle, it looks like a large army is stationed outside King's Landing. As a noble with a given surname, Violet had her own tent in the royal camp, which also became Sig's base. Sig had little interest in the tournament, but Violet participated in the individual competition under various requirements. Joffrey also participated in the competition. As the youngest participant in this tournament and as a prince, he received more attention than Lord Tyrell, who was known as the Knight of Flowers, and became the star of the tournament. The first day was the elimination round of the individual competition, which was judged by the king himself. Warriors from the 7 kingdoms and even other continents were all geared up. Most of the important knights of the 7 kingdoms participated in the competition. Among them, Jaime Lannister, Sandor Clegane, Varys Selmy and others all had their end. Prime Minister Eddard Stark, who had always been opposed, did not attend, but many knights and vassals from Winterfell joined the competition. The competition seemed fair, but in fact it was a game for nobles. Although the lances were customized and there was no distinction between good and bad, the knights had to provide their own horses, armor, etc. Compared to the noble knights wearing expensive armor worth thousands or even tens of thousands of gold dragons, ordinary free knights and mercenaries could not get through the stage of lance fighting. This method of relying on cavalry charge tests the knight's strength, skills and equestrianism, and has high requirements for equipment and war horses. In the first round of eliminations, a large number of free knights and mercenaries who wanted to rise to the top in one step were defeated. Some mercenaries and free knights were actually very good, but unfortunately, either their war horses were not good or their armor was poor, and they were stabbed off their horses without exception. The King-Eater, Jaime Lannister, who was dressed in gold and even his war horse was equipped with golden armor, did not encounter any famous knights as a seed player. He stabbed a large number of opponents off their horses and entered the second round of the competition without any danger. Sandor Clegane, known as the Hound, was wearing a great tight armor and charging all the way. He met Jory Castle, the captain of the guards of Winterfell and the captain of the Prime Minister's guards. The two rushed at each other and fought back and forth. In the end, because the Hound held the ground more steadily and Jory almost fell off his horse due to a mistake, Robert personally ruled that the Hound won. The other Clegane who appeared in the game was the Hound's brother, Sir Gregor Clegane, who was known as the Mountain and was taller than the others in the tournament full of big men. As soon as the Mountain came on the field, he stabbed a young knight from the Vale of Arryn with his lance. Although the lance was specially treated and would break when under pressure, the young knight became the first victim of the tournament because it was directly stabbed into the neck. The knight fell off his horse, blood splattered, and the ladies in the stand screamed. The blonde girl in riding clothes jumped lightly from the stands and ran to the track to give first aid to the dying knight, winning the praise of the people around. When people found out that the girl was actually Princess Myrcella, exclamations resounded throughout the venue. King Robert was very happy, showing off to others that his daughter was as majestic as himself. This episode weakened the loneliness and gloom brought by the death of the young knight. However, Sig, who had an abnormal eye, saw the clues. It was true that the young knight died of a spear, but the crooked neck armor was the main cause of death. More importantly, the Mountain seemed to be ready to take the young man's life early. The seemingly accidental upward shot was not an accident in his eyes. Was it because the Mountain was bloodthirsty, or someone bought the young knight's life? With Sig's insight, he was more inclined to the latter. The next game was more dramatic. The highly anticipated Prince Joffrey was grouped with the handsome and beautiful Knight of Flowers. Both of them were young riders participating in the competition, and they eliminated a large number of adult knights in the previous competition. The Knight of Flowers had superb riding skills and agility. Prince Joffrey was agile, graceful, and deadly. Violet's influence on him was unquestionable. Sigurd saw that the prince's future had changed from the increasingly grey color on his body. The two young knights appeared to a thunderous cheer, and everyone, including King Robert, was watching the duel between the two. After 2 consecutive charges, everyone could see that the two were equally skilled, but Joffrey's riding skills were slightly inferior. In the third round of charging, the Knight of Flowers showed a flaw, and Joffrey took advantage of the victory to pursue, but because his opponent suddenly changed direction and did not have time to adjust the posture of his warhorse, he was stabbed off his horse. King Robert met the two men, praising the Knight of Flowers and encouraging the frustrated Joffrey. Robert seemed very satisfied with the prince's progress. He danced with joy and looked like a father who was not as majestic as a king. He was like most fathers in the world, who were excited when they saw their son's progress. The last match of the day was the most anticipated. It was between the fearless captain of the King's Guard, Barristan, and the sword dancer, Violet. On one side was Barristan Selmy, a knight who wore a white helmet, white armor, and white cloak. His movements were elegant and his momentum was as steady as a mountain. On the other side was Violet, who was lightly dressed and only equipped with a crowned stag shield. No one would doubt Violet's decision to not wear armor. In the previous competition, she avoided many stabs with this outfit and successfully stabbed 3 regular knights off their horses, including the famous Tyrell Knight. The bell rang, and the two turned their horses and charged towards each other. Barristan was as steady as a mountain, with his lance raised and pointed straight ahead. Violet rode her warhorse, flowing like clouds in water, and every small movement was as smooth as silk. Chapter 36. Martial Arts Tournament, Part 2. Robert summoned his servants early in the morning. He had suffered a lot to participate in the group competition. Not only did he miss breakfast, but he also had to cooperate with the two little guys to help him tighten his waist. 7 layers of hell, the Lannister family was useless, and he couldn't even put on his breastplate later. He wanted to strangle the 2 blondies to death. Damn Lannister. He was very angry. The 2 boys ruined the good mood since yesterday. The first day of the tournament was unexpectedly fierce, but the key was that Joffrey finally got it. The little guy fought back and forth in the tournament. Although he was still defeated by the Tile Kid, it can be seen that the defeat was only a slight difference in riding skills. This disadvantage can even be considered an advantage for the 2-year age difference. When Joffrey is 17 years old, what about the Knight of Flowers? The little white face is not even worthy of carrying shoes. And there's the lovely daughter Marcella, who has shown the demeanor of a baron. He is the bravest warrior in the 7 kingdoms, and his son and daughters should be the same. He was very grateful to the sword dancer and would definitely reward this woman in the future, if only she was the mother of the child. Robert was trying his best to restrain his desire. Compared to her identity as a woman, her teaching of the children was more important. He kept reminding himself not to be emotional for the sake of the children. The sword dancer presented him and all the audience with a wonderful confrontation. The old and strong Barristan, an old knight who was not sure to win even when he was young, fought back and forth with a petite woman. If it weren't for the fact that the woman was at a disadvantage in terms of physical strength, the victory should have been the sword dancer. From that moment on, he realized who Violet looked like. He would not tell anyone, not even Ned. She looked like Lyanna. It was not that the two looked alike, in fact, they were not alike at all. It was purely a feeling. In his impression, Lyanna became more and more vague, but Violet replaced the lover he had been thinking about day and night. In contrast, he hated the women of the Lannister family more and more. The idea of participating in the competition arose at that time. A certain thought lingered in his mind. What kind of person was he in the eyes of the sword dancer? How would Lyanna look at him now? Would they look down on him? A fat pig that couldn't even get off a horse. He couldn't stand the thought of this. Participate in the competition and find the old self again. This thought overwhelmed everything and became the only thought in Robert's mind since yesterday. He held his breath and tried to expel the gas as much as possible. He even farted more than once. The 2 little guys still couldn't put on the breastplate for him. I heard you want to participate in the competition. Ned walked into the tent. He was still so direct and didn't know how to restrain himself. You two, help me. Look, this is the person recommended by the Queen, and he can't even help me put on the armor. He pulled back the robe, and the 2 teenagers fell to the ground with an unstable center of gravity. Barristan also entered the tent. Robert shook his head, and he had already guessed what they wanted to say. Shut up, all of you. I miss compete today. I'm participating in a team competition. No one can say that I'm reluctant to give up the prize money. Ned stared at him from head to toe. It's not their problem. You're too fat to wear it. Is this the euphemism he learned after becoming the Prime Minister? He looked at Ned and then at Barristan, two guys who were too serious. Fortunately, Stannis was not there, otherwise the three bastards would turn the royal meeting into a funeral parlor. I'm too fat. Hey, you're the only one who dares to tell me the truth. Am I really that fat? Robert patted his belly. Look at you, your waistline is almost as tall as your height. Ned said with a cold face, which made people feel funny for some reason. Robert, Ned and Barristan laughed out loud. Then the two young servants laughed too. Isn't this funny? The Prime Minister's jokes are to your taste. He glared at the Lannister boys, and they couldn't laugh anymore. You two bastards, what are you still doing here? Go find me an expander that can stretch the breastplate. Go find it. The servants ran away as if they were escaping. He blinked at Ned. I hope the blacksmiths won't be stunned for too long when they hear the word expander. The three of them left. So don't be delusional. I must compete. Don't worry about my safety. I have the king's guard to protect me. Barristan, will you let the assassin get close? Robert was not stupid. He decided to use strategy to persuade the two stubborn people. Group fighting is chaotic, even Barristan can't take care of everything. If someone wants to target you, they don't need to really shout and kill. When you are not prepared, they can just use a poison dagger to lightly scratch you. No one will know what happened. Ned looked like he would not give up until he agreed. Hey Barristan, what do you think? This involves your reputation. Robert decided to split the alliance between the Prime Minister and the Captain of the Iron Guard. Two stubborn guys nagging in his ears will definitely drive him crazy. I won't let His Majesty get hurt. The old man said firmly. Haha, it's possible. I know the old man cares about his face. What else can the stubborn Ned say? But what I'm worried about is that even if we win the game tomorrow, we will have no reputation to speak of. The old man was making trouble. Robert realized from his flickering eyes that something was wrong. What do you mean? He had a strong back premonition, but he still pretended not to realize it. In tomorrow's game, if you play, you will definitely not lose. Ned put on the hateful face. You mean, the cowardly birds will lose to me on purpose? The anger in his chest was burning. He clenched his fists and hammered them hard on the table. I'm afraid no one dares to defeat the king. The effectiveness of the tournament will be greatly reduced. Ned looked so hateful that he was sure of victory. He really wanted to punch him in the face. He couldn't help but throw the staghorn helmet at Barristan. Get out of here, you ruined my good deeds. The old man still had a knightly demeanor, bowed and stepped back. You stay. The old man left, and only two people were left in the tent. His anger disappeared. You don't know how cruel you are. Let me be the king of Shlomo. I bet you and Durin can do better than me. Your Majesty, you're too kind. You have been in power for 18 years. The achievements are obvious to all. Ned didn't dare to look into the other person's eyes when he lied. Only a ghost would be fooled by him. Don't you say that it is much better than the Mad King's era. Robert shook his head and picked up the bottle to pour a glass for both of them. I don't need it. This is the king's order, drink it. Looking at the honest man, Ned drank the wine, and Robert's mouth was full of bitterness. They all said that I won and Rower lost, but what happened? Rower got your sister, but I only had that Lannister woman. He was free, but I had to suffer on the throne. Did I really win? Before the finals, a group competition was held first. The fighting of multiple teams was like a battle between two armies. The commander with a loud voice, the sergeants who cooperated well, and the one with better luck would win. After breaking several arms and many broken fingers, the Red Monk throws one with a flaming sword. If I were to go down, how could it be the turn of the bald man to show off his power? Robert complained in his heart and made up his mind to bless the winner. The archery champion was upset. A commoner who was unknown and not even a squire became the champion. Before Robert announced, a large number of noble stewards or garrison captains and other people rushed up. As long as young people are not stupid, they can easily become knights if they find a backer. To go further, luck and achievements are needed. The final of the individual competition is the finale. Littlefinger made a bet with Renly. Renly bet on the Hound to win, and Littlefinger bet on the King's Lair. Robert didn't like either of them. Relatively speaking, he hoped that the Hound would win. At least it would be good to teach the King's Lair a lesson. The game began. In the first round of charge, the King's Lair dodged beautifully and gracefully, and the Hound was almost fooled. He used his shield to block the stab of the spear but was almost stabbed off his horse. Littlefinger sat next to Sansa of the Stark family and said something to her. Damn guy, Didn't he know that Sansa was Joffrey's fiancée? If the dwarf dared to pay attention to his daughter-in-law, Robert would not mind giving him a lesson he would never forget. Screams and cheers rang out, the Kingslayer fell off his horse, and the hound walked away. The Kingslayer's helmet was deflated, and he stumbled around the arena like a fool until the squire caught up with him. This was the happiest Robert had laughed in years. He laughed so hard that the queen, who was sitting upright, could see him until she ran away. The next match was between the Mountain and the Knight of Flowers. The women wailed, and even the dignified Sansa joined in the booing. Robert prayed to the seven gods to spare the pretty boy a good day. Chapter 37. Martial Arts Tournament, Part 2. The Mountain competes with Barristan. They both stabbed each other at the same time. The Mountain's strength was superior and Barristan fell off his horse. The audience cheered for the Mountain with a momentum of almost breaking their wrists. The final was between two fairy tale knights. No match would be more anticipated than the competition between the Knight of Flowers and the Mountain. The Knight of Flowers wore silver armor and a cloak made of real flowers. His appearance attracted cheers from all the women in the audience. No matter they were noble ladies or peasant girls, everyone cheered for him indiscriminately. He routinely threw the flowers on his cloak to the women in the stands on both sides, and took out the most beautiful purple rose to give to the most outstanding woman. The girls screamed and competed to attract his attention. What surprised Violet was that he ignored many beautiful ladies. When he passed by the charming flower of the north, Sansa, he just threw an ordinary white flower. Even the heroic and blonde Princess Myrcella failed to get his favor. When the purple rose fell into her hands, there were jealous and sad sighs all over the place. She subconsciously drew out her sword and let the flower rest on the tip of the sword. Loras, who was as handsome as a picture, bowed to her on horseback. "That's great, he's interested in you, he likes you." Myrcella shouted passionately. "My heart is about to break, why you?" Sansa frowned and said angrily. "I thought you cared more about Joffrey's flowers." Violet's right wrist trembled slightly, and the rose turned into a rain of petals and fell. Loras covered his chest and made a heartbroken expression. His action attracted the support of the women, and Violet shook her head and sat down. Joffrey sat down beside her with a nervous look on his face. "Violet, I will definitely give you flowers next time." She was stunned by Joffrey's confession and didn't know how to answer for a while. Sansa's sad and angry eyes on the other side were aggressive, and she also felt the stern gaze from the queen behind her. The crowd gasped in fear like a strong wind blowing through the woods, and the Mountain appeared on his giant horse, like a devilish black knight from a book. The Mountain's horse kept neighing and his pace was disordered, as if something was disturbing him. His roar was like the roar of a wild beast, silencing the women and causing most of the men to twist their bodies in their seats uncomfortably. The bell rang, and the Knight of Flowers and his beautiful pure white mare, which looked like a unicorn, turned into a white mark and galloped towards the Mountain. On the other side, the Mountain did not have the prestige he had in the previous rounds. He tried hard to control his horse, and it was not easy to even keep the direction of riding stable, let alone sprint. The two horses staggered. Loras easily dodged the lost lance, and the Mountain's mount actually jumped with its master on the isolated wooden stake. "Is his horse in heat?" Violet saw the clue. The audience gasped in fear. With a rumble, the Mountain fell to the ground. His huge size became a disadvantage at this time. His armor was crushed in many places, and it was painful just to look at it. "Bring the sword." The Mountain climbed up angrily. A servant with a pale face handed over his two-handed giant sword. He held the sword in one hand, and the dark red flashed. The tall warhorse was split from the shoulder and neck. The black and red blood sprayed far away. People in the audience left their seats and stretched their heads to watch, screaming and gasping one after another. On the other side, Loras kept throwing flowers into the audience. Someone was already shouting to remind him, but the young man didn't seem to realize the danger. The Mountain roared and rushed forward, scaring Loras' mare's legs to tremble. "Someone bring my sword. Give me the sword." Loras shouted. The Mountain's speed was not much slower than that of a galloping horse. Loras, who was empty-handed, took off the knight's shield from his left arm and held it with both hands. Bang! There was a loud noise. Loras flew out and his mount was knocked down by the huge impact. The flower-woven cape spun in mid-air, fell on the grass and continued to roll. The Mountain roared and continued to move forward. Many city guards, warriors and knights stepped forward to stop him, but they were too far away. Loras was unable to stand up immediately. The Mountain came to his side and raised his greatsword. He was like a human guillotine. "Come quickly, save poor Loras." Sansa screamed for help. At the same time, many people screamed. It seemed that Loras' fate of being split in two was doomed. A grey shadow stood between the Mountain and Loras. The Mountain chopped it without hesitation. Sigurd, who was dressed in light riding clothes and wearing the crown and stag family emblem, pretended to be a squire, but he actually grabbed the mountain's wrist with one hand. The size difference between the two was huge, just like a child trying to stop a giant bear from swinging its claws. The mountain roared, his face flushed, and his sword could not fall. A gray shadow appeared and hit the mountain from the side. The one who shot was the hound, the mountain's younger brother. The hound was already tall, but next to the mountain, he was like an immature child. The mountain was furious and ran up to fight with the hound. Violet held a long sword in her hand and tried to support him, but was stopped by Sigurd. The mountain was really mad, slashing at his brother, trying to split the hound in half with every blow. There was no affection in his swing. The hound was different. His sword never hit his brother above the neck. He was on the defensive most of the time. Loras was held up, and the handsome knight couldn't even walk steadily. Sigurd took advantage of the chaos to leave people's sight. Why? This is the best chance to enter the royal family's vision and obtain legal status. She asked him, I thought you took action for this. Don't attack the mountain. Sigurd's answer surprised her, although this guy is hateful, he is not necessarily our enemy. Stop it. King Robert said in a loud voice. The hound knelt down immediately after hearing it. The Mad Mountain's attack missed. He turned to look at the king, with only a glimmer of rationality in his bloodshot eyes. Soldiers surrounded the mountain. Let him go. Robert waved his hand. The mountain pushed away the soldiers surrounding him with a look of dissatisfaction and strode away. Loras staggered at the hound and raised his hand. For the first time in that tournament, cheers were given to the half-ghost-faced knight. What was even more rare was that most of the cheers came from women. To celebrate the end of the tournament, the king hosted a banquet for the guests in the tent. Violet was also invited. She was not the type who was good at socializing, and she was only bored with such things, but she had no reason to refuse. She invited Princess Myrcella to consult about dress and etiquette. The two talked a lot, and Violet benefited a lot. The servant came to report that Prince Joffrey came to see her. Myrcella, you step aside for a moment. Joffrey never paid attention to etiquette to his sister, and acted bossy. The little girl has become more powerful since she accepted Violet's swordsmanship lessons. She pouted her lips in protest. Violet realized that Joffrey was not in a good state and suggested that Myrcella give him some time. The little girl left reluctantly. Have you been drinking? Violet's eyes turned stern. Joffrey shrank his neck, and the two of them returned to the mode of coach and student, and his arrogance disappeared for the most part. But unlike usual, Joffrey was particularly stubborn today. He raised his head again, his eyes filled with an indescribable emotion. I'm a prince, what's wrong with drinking? Violet keenly sensed the unusual atmosphere and did not interrupt her. Violet, my mother asked me to get close to Sansa and treat her as my future wife. She asked me to be attentive to her and show my admiration, but I can't do it. Why? She's a lovely girl. Because, the prince blushed, his voice trembling, I like you. Violet opened her mouth, but was speechless. Chapter 38 Joffrey Baratheon. Joffrey thought that Violet would be so surprised that she would be speechless, and then her eyes would be filled with tears, and she would tell him that it was impossible for them to be together. In fact, the lady was very surprised, but she calmed down after a while. Her sapphire eyes looked him up and down, with a teasing look. He didn't like her like this. Violet, I'm serious. Although he was angry, he knew that he couldn't be impatient at this time. Brown hair fluttered in the air. You are not strong enough to share the joys and sorrows with others. I don't feel safe with you. Her tone was strange, as if she was reading from a script. Her fair face showed a blush. Joffrey didn't have the leisure to study the surprising parts of the lady's expression. Blood rushed to his head, anger, frustration, and worry and fear. Violet is always right. Since he met her, facts have proved that she is always right. Is everything she said true? He is a handsome prince, the future heir of the kingdom. The fact should be so. Why does it seem that he is just a rich boy who can't be helped in a mouth? There is no way to give girls a sense of security. Is this really the case? An indescribable brutality was stirring in his body. He wanted to draw out his sword and stab the girl in the chest. If you laugh at me again, this is the result of rejecting the prince. He glared at her viciously. After all, he did not turn his fantasy into reality. Violet looked at him coldly and turned away. He was like an abandoned puppy. How he hoped that she would come back. Your Highness, the Queen is looking for you. The voice of the hound sounded behind him. Joffrey was startled to find that he had been standing alone in the empty tent for an unknown period of time. His mother was dressed up today. She had a graceful temperament. Mother, you are so beautiful today. No one in the whole kingdom can compare with you. His praise was not completely exaggerated. Today's a very important day. I want you to try your best to please Sansa and make her fall in love with you." The mother said coldly, "Don't put on your princely airs. Be attentive and considerate and let her feel your fascination with her." "But I don't like her." The mother raised her eyebrows. He was so scared that he immediately changed his words. "It's impossible for me to be obsessed with a little girl. You're obsessed with a woman who humiliated you." She hit the nail on the head. Joffrey opened his mouth, unable to refute. "My dear, you'll be the king in the future and you can have as many women as you want, but not yet. No matter how annoying the Starks are, they support your father after all. As long as you are patient, they will support you. There is nothing wrong with Sansa. She is full of thoughts about princes, knights, princesses and the like. She is a little boring, but she is a perfect choice for the queen. Mom, you told me that the king has the final say and can get everything he wants. Why should I tolerate a woman I don't like?" He saw his mother frown and realized that he had forgotten to use honorifics. "I don't hate Sansa, I just can't get interested in her." His mother slammed the table. Joffrey shut up obediently. He was a coward. It was really as Violet said, too weak. But is it wrong to listen to his mother? "I'm not asking you to really love her, be obsessed with her, or just pretend. That girl can't see through your tricks." She moved closer to him. He smelled the scent of her perfume, which was rich, noble, elegant, and frighteningly superior. "If you make her fall in love with you and have your child, the North will not be a problem. The stupid wolves will swear allegiance to you wholeheartedly." Joffrey nodded in agreement, just like a child. Then came Myrcella and Tormund. Their mother told them to know etiquette, to show goodwill to the Prime Minister as much as possible, and to become friends with the Stark children. Joffrey realized that his mother was hostile to the Stark family. Her attitude was more like a feint before a fatal blow. The banquet was grand and lively. Lords, nobles, wealthy merchants from all over the country, even the governor of the free city across the narrow sea, and merchants from the summer sea and the Basilisk Islands all attended. There were all kinds of treasures. The Baratheon family and the powerful Lannister family became the focus and stars of everyone's attention. His mother specially sent guards to block all kinds of flatterers for him. Her meaning was very clear, just focus on pleasing Sansa. Sansa wore a dark green dress, which matched her tall figure and high cheekbones, making her look like a beauty from a story. He didn't hate her, nor was he obsessed with her. Who would be obsessed with a little girl? Violet didn't attend. He dared to assert that if the sword dancers were dressed up, all women except his mother would be outshined. He sighed, took Sansa's hand, and kissed her hand elegantly. The little girl blushed, and the nun beside her nodded and smiled. The two of them walked into the main tent hand in hand like a prince and princess in a fairy tale, and there were praises and blessings all around. Sansa lowered her head and looked delicate and shy. Joffrey tried hard to be a loyal and brave guard knight, and he was sighing for Violet's absence. Before the formal banquet, the king needed to give a speech. But his father seemed to find it troublesome and always used laughter and scolding to get away with it. His mother was angry like a god, sitting beside his father. Whenever there was such an occasion, he would feel sad for the two of them. Why would two people who were so mismatched get together? Then the Prime Minister gave a speech. For reasons known to all, Prime Minister Stark only gave a few short sentences. The banquet entered the dinner time. On the long table, plates of exquisite meals were served and removed, and servants were coming and going. Joffrey sat with Sansa. He personally introduced various special foods that Sansa could not eat in the north and fed them to her thoughtfully. After taking a few sips of fruit wine, Sansa was no longer reserved. She laughed sweetly and told him about the topic of her little girl. Of course he would not be interested, but he still remembered his mother's instructions and tried his best to pretend to be interested. He secretly observed his mother. The eyes from afar were mostly stern. He understood what she meant, that she wanted to serve the little girl so well that she would forget who her father was. The banquet was a torment for him. The topic was boring, and he had to smile and answer. The food in front of him could only be watched by the servants taking away the plates one by one, while he was busy serving Sansa. After a few rounds, he was hungry and he missed Violet's training. Although the special training was hard, it was not so suffocating, and he could eat his fill every time. He secretly compared Sansa with Violet. There was no comparison. "Stinky woman, get out, I am the king." At the main table, his father threw the cups and plates to the ground and yelled at his mother. His mother's face was cold, and she left with her servants in silence. Uncle Jaime and other Lannisters also left with her. Joffrey hesitated. According to habit, he always stood on his mother's side in such occasions and left with her. But because of Sansa, it would be too abrupt for him to leave immediately. Violet's voice rang out, "You're too weak, no woman can find security around you. No, no, I am a responsible person, he shouted to Violet in his heart. Then he gave up the idea of leaving alone. My dear lady, the dinner is almost over, and I hope to escort you back to the Prime Minister's tower. He signaled the Hound to help the Sept of House Stark up, and he took Sansa's hand, and the group walked through the chaotic venue and into the quiet night. Chapter 39 The Real Sander. The three of them walked through the drunken crowd, and from time to time a hand or a head would poke out from under the table. The Hound cleared the way for the two of them, kicking back anything that got in the way. Joffrey usually called the Hound our dog or simply called him dog, until recently when Violet stopped him and told him that calling someone by such a nickname was an extreme insult and dishonorable to the speaker. Joffrey was surprised that this was the case, but he had not discovered it earlier, and no one around him told him that he was wrong, not even the Hound himself. This was evidence that Violet was actually good to him. As more and more similar things happened, he became more and more distrustful of the people around him, and turned to believe that Violet could help him see the reality. The Hound, who had been familiar with him since he was a child, became unfamiliar, until Violet told him that the Hound surpassed Uncle Heine in martial arts, and he realized that the impression of the Hound and the real Hound were two completely different things. The three of them walked in silence. Sansa looked up at him several times, looking quite embarrassed. He also felt that it was strange to walk around like this. The Hound. That, Sander. He always felt something was wrong. It's hard to believe that you and the Mountain are brothers. I mean, your personalities are so different, and I'd never heard you mention your brother. The Hound was silent. Just when Joffrey thought he hadn't heard it at all, he spoke in a hoarse voice. My dear prince, who I am, what I do, whether I have a brother, whether he is like me, these things are not important at all. You just need to know that I am your bodyguard, helping you do things, protecting you from harm, and killing for you when necessary. The Hound rarely spoke so much. Joffrey even noticed the sarcasm in his tone. He had never said that before. Had he really never said that before? He had no confidence. Power and status have blinded your eyes. If you lose these, you are nothing at all. As a prince, the saddest thing is to not see your true nature clearly, and to take the illusion decorated with false reputation as reality. Violet's voice was still in his ears. He didn't understand it very well, but now he grasped the key points of her words. Perhaps it was because of the change that the sarcasm in the Hound's tone could be heard. I don't mean to offend anything, it's just that, he tried to choose his words carefully, and found that if the two were placed on an equal footing, he was nothing to the Hound. It's just that I'm surprised you would risk your life to help others. You don't give people the impression that you do. When he spoke to the Hound with the attitude of a tournament champion, he found that the Hound's pressure was stronger than he had imagined. My good master, the Hound's tone was helpless and irritable, you must be asking this out of curiosity. How nice it would be if everything could remain the same as before. You were a prince, the future king, and I was a dog, your bodyguard. This time, Joffrey heard a stronger sarcasm, and he swore in his heart that he would never call him our dog again. I am not doing this out of chivalry, nor do I want to help the child cubs, but, his tone became fierce, and his already tall figure seemed even more majestic. I just can't tolerate the opportunity slipping away from my hands. My abominable brother, I hate him, I hope to tear him to pieces, and use his head as a wineglass. He was like a demon in the dark night, spewing out the poisonous gas of curses. Please don't say it, okay? Sansa begged tremblingly, and Joffrey remembered that there was a girl beside him. The Hound turned around, and the burnt half of his face was more hideous than usual. I'm sorry, my dear lady, I forgot there was a lady here. His tone was very polite, but his attitude was a far cry from etiquette. Joffrey could tell that the Hound was angry about her appearance here, and wanted to drive the little girl away immediately. You are an obedient bird, right? You were taught to speak by the nuns of Winterfell since you were a child. You can say what people like to hear, and everyone wants to listen to what you say. You can't say anything else, right? You scared her. The murderous look in the Hound's eyes made him wonder if he would be killed without any warning one day if he kept calling him a dog. He agreed more and more with Violet's statement that he used to be surrounded by illusions and could not see the truth. In silence, the three continued to move forward. Finally, they left the tent and came to the stone-paved road. The Hound led the horse and went to find Sansa's carriage. During the whole process, he kept carrying Septa Mordane, who was so drunk that she couldn't even walk, like a scarecrow. Throwing the nun into the carriage, it was Joffrey's turn to take Sansa into the carriage. After a little hesitation, he chose to ride side by side with the Hound in front who led the way. Without Sansa, he felt the atmosphere was even heavier. You hate the Mountain so much, why don't you kill him? With your ability in the righteous position today, it shouldn't be difficult to kill him. Joffrey was surprised at himself for thinking this way. Why did he think this way? The Mountain didn't provoke him, so why? Was he also influenced by Violet? No, I won't kill him. The Hound turned around. He felt a huge pressure, as if he was stared at by a beast. Look at what he did to me. I was pressed into the fire when I was a child, and I got this scar. The Hound's voice was low, and resentment echoed in his chest. Death is too easy for him. He must continue to suffer. Only by living can he suffer. The Hound stared coldly ahead. Joffrey slowed down the horse and waited for the carriage. Dear Sansa, Santa the dog really has a secret, and he doesn't want to discuss his life experience with others. Joffrey didn't know why he had to go to this extent, and even apologized for the Hound. He had a feeling that if it was Violet, she would definitely agree with his approach. My dear prince, it's nothing. As long as you are by my side, nothing can scare me. Sansa's voice was full of sincerity. She must have fallen in love with me, which was in line with my mother's wishes, but is this really okay? The carriage arrived at the Prime Minister's tower, and the escort mission was completed. After saying goodbye to Sansa, they ran into the Prime Minister and his servants. Lord Stark, you are still out on patrol so late. It's really hard for you. He followed the instructions and gave the new Prime Minister the highest courtesy, although he himself did not think that this dude with a bitter face all day long was more talented than Uncle Stanley's. Your Highness, I am sorry for your concern for my daughter. I hope you have a safe journey home. The Prime Minister's response was polite, but quite stiff. He looked at the tall figure on the horse with doubts. He heard another tone, as if he was caught doing something bad. Lord Stark, who values honor over life, is no more than that. After saying goodbye to the Prime Minister, the Hound laughed, as if he had glimpsed the weakness of his prey in the dark. Why? Joffrey asked in confusion. They are going to the land of romance. Can you imagine? Lord Stark, who was as cold as ice, will also go there. I am curious whether he will read out the code of chivalry before doing anything. The Hound's dislike for the new Prime Minister should be influenced by his mother. Joffrey remembered that his mother hated the Stark family and called them uncivilized barbarians. How did you tell? The Prime Minister didn't say where he came from. My good prince, you are still young and don't understand this. The land of romance uses special fragrances to decorate the atmosphere. The higher the grade, the stronger the fragrance and the more special the fragrance. Our new Prime Minister seems to be unable to bear it as soon as he leaves his wife. After laughing for a while, the Hound stopped talking and seemed to be immersed in his own thoughts. Joffrey put the Prime Minister's misbehavior behind him. In the past, he would have happily run to tell his mother. She would be happy to hear about the scandal of her mortal enemy. But today, he had too many things to think about, including his past self, the self who had always been surrounded by illusions, and the reason why Violet refused. He was not as noble as imagined, nor as talented as people praised. Perhaps he should leave King's Landing, leave the illusions, and face his true self in order to win her favor. As he thought about this, he made up his mind. Chapter 40 Osha. The half-covered helmet was extremely heavy, and the spear was not for women. Just to maintain the balance of the spear, Osha swayed from side to side from time to time. She gritted her teeth and persisted. This was her only way out. There was no place for her in the team. She would have been made into bacon and stuffed into Steve's stomach. If it weren't for Old Hawk's asthma, she would have been cut into pieces and thrown into the basket. She had to survive. Captain Steve was tall and strong, and he knew a little more swordsmanship than others, but he was a fool. Every time this rough guy lifted her skirt to do it, it made her feel unbearable pain. If she cried out, she would be beaten. She endured it silently and gritted her teeth to survive. Although the men were rude, the one she hated the most in the team was Harley. The short and yellow-haired bitch was most afraid of horses. She catered to Steve's interests and snatched food from her mouth several times. The look she gave her made people feel uneasy. The bitch must want her life. She must find a chance to kill her as soon as possible, otherwise she would die in the future. The team was sent by Mance to investigate the situation near the Great Wall. Steve took it upon himself to kill Mance's confidant and sneak across the gap in the Great Wall with a few people. That was the most thrilling thing she had ever experienced. Due to the long summer, the Great Wall kept dripping water, and the water flowed like a waterfall. They hid in the waist-deep freezing water, waiting for the guards on the Great Wall to pass, and then silently crossed the gap. It was here that Old Hawk choked on a mouthful of ice water, and continued to have a fever and cough for the next few days. Steve killed him before his meat deteriorated due to illness to ensure the food supply of the team. Steve always emphasized that after crossing the Great Wall, there were fruits and fresh meat everywhere in the south. In fact, deer could be seen everywhere, and ripe fruits could be picked up by bending over. At first, everyone believed him because he was born as a Black Crow and was a person who truly experienced the abundance of the south. After crossing the Great Wall, they realized that they had been deceived. It may not be cold here, but there's not so much food. Not to mention the deer, after walking for a few days, not even a hair could be seen. In the dark and secret forest, the howling of wolves and the footprints of shadowy mounted cats kept people awake at night. Steve used violence and beatings to solve the trust problem. His real confidant was the bald man from Black Crow who was with him. The two of them often plotted something. Maybe they were discussing who to eat first. Osha didn't think this was a nightmare. The lack of food in the team had made her alert. If they chose to eat her, she would kill 1 or 2 people first, even if she had to fight to the death. Her first target was the foul-mouthed Harley, and then anyone else. Kill 1 to get back to the team, and kill 2 to make a profit. It would be good if she could find a chance to escape, but Harley, the bitch, kept staring at her, making it difficult for her to move. The howl of the wolf sounded, and then there were wolves calling in response in all parts of the forest. The bald man made a gesture, and everyone squatted on the spot. You go to the front, you prepare to support, and you take the spear and attack from the side. Steve assigned tasks. He was an old hand in this area. No one in the team would underestimate his talent in this area, which was why he could become the captain. The howling of wolves means prey has appeared. If they are lucky enough to encounter a small wolf pack, they will have a chance to rob the wolf pack of food. If they are unlucky and encounter a large wolf pack, they will have to prepare to run away. This is how they came all the way from the Great Wall. At first, Osha was skeptical about this strategy, but now she prays that there are not too many wolves. The smell of blood wafted from the upland vent, and only 1 wolf was howling. Stupid dog, hunting alone and still barking. It's obvious that you are sending us food. Harley's laughter was hoarse and unpleasant, but there's no place for you, a stinky woman, understand? It's useless to look at me. Steve is obsessed with me. He will treat you as a sheep, cut you open, pull out your intestines, and then eat you. Faced with Harley's provocation, Osha turned her head away. She warned herself that she was a warrior now, and her status was higher than that of the yellow-haired tool for sexual gratification. But she still remembered that every time she quarreled with Harley, she would be beaten by Steve. The sound of horse hooves. Everyone was as if they were facing a great enemy. Steve's forehead was covered with sweat. Harley pulled out her useless razor, and the bald man kept turning his axe in his hands. Osha drew the spear and recited the formula in her mind. At this time, she must eliminate interference, otherwise other people will stand. They dispersed and maintained a formation to support each other. In front of Osha, an unreal scene appeared. A thin but beautiful boy, wearing a fur coat, riding the most beautiful horse she had ever seen in her life, strolling in the woods. She walked forward bravely, and the horse saw her and wanted to retreat in fear. She reached out and grabbed the peg and pulled the little horse to the pavilion. Let me see what this is, a young master, she said teasingly, but looked around nervously. The young master was seen here without his guards or servants. It was like a piece of fat meat that could walk in front of her, with no beasts following and no one else snatching it. Living in the north for many years, Osha didn't believe that there would be such a good thing in this world. It must be a trap. While holding onto the pony to prevent the fat meat from escaping, she held her spear and stood guard with great effort. Perhaps the little guy's guards would jump out from the side, slashing in the air with their swords, or perhaps a crossbow would shoot out from the gaps in the woods. Osha, what are you doing, darling? Steve strode forward and grabbed the little guy who was trying to turn his horse's head. Little master, where are you from? Where are your family? Steve had a smile on his face, but even a fool could see the danger in his eyes. I'm not a little master, my name is Brandon. Who are you and why are you stopping me? My brother is nearby and the guards are coming soon. It's for your own good, leave now. The little guy said with an expression that looked like he was about to cry. Guards. You little bastard, stop talking nonsense. I don't see you have guards. Harley opened her mouth, showing our mottled teeth and laughed. Come down quickly, take off your clothes, and take out all the valuables. We can't spare your life. Steve looked at Harley blankly, as if he was confused. Spare his life for? Harley poked him in the waist. Oh, yes, hand over all the valuables. No fool would believe you. Osha swallowed her words back into her stomach, and she was still alert around. Something was wrong. Such a delicate young master, look at the silver cape buckle and the horse on his body. Although she had never been to the south, she didn't think that ordinary families in the south could own such an outfit. Get down, kid. Steve pulled hard, but the young master didn't move. What? Are you still resisting? I can't get down, I'm tied up. The young master's face turned purple with anxiety. You'd better run for your lives. I'm Brandon Stark, and my father is Eddard Stark, the Duke of Winterfell and the Lord of the North. If my family knew what you did to me, they would kill you. The atmosphere was very awkward. Steve stopped moving his hands. He was originally planning to cut off the leather buckle with a knife. I believe what he said. Only people from the Stark family would threaten others at this time. The bald man held an axe and said carefully, "Cut off his tongue and see if he can still talk nonsense." Harry said viciously, "This kid is really tied up. He is a cripple." Steve laughed and lifted the young master off the horse. The little guy's legs were bleeding, and it was unknown where he was cut. "Put my brother down, and I can leave you a whole body." A cold voice sounded on the other side. Osha turned around and saw a young man in mail armor, about 15 or 16 years old. He rode a tall gray horse, with a long sword in his hand flashing blue light, and a gray wolf followed him. It was strange that the horse was not afraid of the wolf. Osha looked around. There was no one else except the young man. "Ha, another young master has come to the door." Steve turned his head and watched. "Leave the horse, clothes, and weapons, and you can go." Steve's eyes were filled with murderous intent, and Osha knew that he would never let the two of them go. "Why don't you surrender obediently? 6-1, do you think you will have a chance?" Harley reminded the young man gloomily, and the dagger in her hand flashed black light, which was a sign of poison. "Long live Winter City!" The young knight suddenly shouted, and the warhorse stood up and rushed up. The bald man raised his axe and rushed forward, as if he wanted to chop his horse's leg. The sound of the sword cutting into the flesh, the bald man was hit by the long sword head-on, his helmet was like paper, and blood and white things spurted out. Chapter 41. Unable to fit in, Theon led his guards to chase the deer. The hounds were useless. Only the formation could help the hunt succeed. He was not in a hurry to shoot, not because he could not hit the target, but because he considered the taste of the prey. If he shot the heart directly, causing heavy bleeding, the deer would not be edible. The blood-soaked muscles were fishy and the astringent taste in the mouth would make people feel like they were swallowing vomit. Theon was not a casual person. He had high requirements for hunting. He tried to deprive the prey of its ability to move when it was exhausted and bleed from the neck. This was a clean and perfect way. People shouted and horses neighed. The guards on both sides chased the deer back and forth, and the speed was getting slower and slower. The last arrow pierced its front leg. The poor little guy fell in the mud and stared at him with a sad face. This was the look that Theon could not stand the most. He pulled out a dagger and covered the deer's eyes with his hands. The dagger cut the artery in the neck. With a crisp sound similar to the breaking of a string, the deer's body softened and there was no sound. It took a long time to tie the dead deer to the horse. When the guard in front of him said the problem, he was still immersed in the joy of perfectly capturing the prey. Dismount and prepare for battle. Theon picked up the bow and arrow and tied the warhorse to the tree trunk. In the distance, people shouted and horses neighed, as if a war was happening. Grey wind was howling, and Rob's roar was faintly heard. They were moving very fast, and the guards were very anxious. "Don't worry, what should happen has already happened. We must hit the target with one strike. If the enemy has too many people, save the two young masters and retreat immediately." He didn't know if the guards understood, but this must be the best strategy at this stage. Lightly dressed, with a long sword, he was the fastest. He made up his mind to rely on archery to decide the outcome. The sound of mail rubbing against leather robes and the heavy breathing of the guards became sparse, and everyone pulled away. The enemy should have a lot of people. Only a long enough front line, plus the cover of the dense forest, can make people think that this is also an army. He prayed to the seven gods that Rob, a guy with well-developed limbs, would not fight the enemy to death. He didn't want to lose his friends. Yes, he and Rob were not kings and subjects, but friends. The sound of fighting ended faster than expected, and he was the first to rush out of the bushes, with a good view. Rob was high above, riding a warhorse. Relieved, Theon found a slightly higher earth slope, stuck the arrow in the soil, and observed the situation while drawing the bow. The scene was different from what he expected, but still critical. Rob and Greywind were fighting, and several bodies fell on the ground. A tall man grabbed little Bran and seemed to be negotiating with Rob. Without listening carefully, you can guess that it must be something like "Put down your sword or I will kill little Bran." Rob, who was as stupid as an ox, actually put down his sword. Theon shook his head and aimed at the big man's fist. He confirmed that the arrow would not hit Bran after penetrating, relaxed his right hand, and the bowstring sounded lightly, watching the tail feathers of the arrow spinning in the air. The big man's body stiffened and fell limply. Theon pulled out the second arrow and walked slowly forward while keeping it ready to shoot. He kept his speed very well, and the guards also rushed out of the dense forest. There was only the sound of Grey Wind biting the prey at the scene. He did not rush to observe other places. He first confirmed that the big man was indeed dead, then he collected the arrow and lifted little Bran out of the mud. It was a beautiful arrow, piercing from the back, and the bloody arrow had pierced through the chest. The corpse maintained an expression of disbelief, probably not understanding where the arrow came from until his death. "Look at this arrow, the big guy is dead completely." He kicked the corpse. "Little Bran, it's thrilling, isn't it? But don't worry, this guy has no chance to hurt you." "Asshole, what if you shot Bran?" He did not expect to be scolded, and it was after saving his brother. What if the opponent is wearing a breastplate and the shot can't penetrate it? What if the shot misses? Also, what if he still has the strength to deal with Bran after being shot? "You're too careless." Robb left him speechless. It was not that he admitted his mistake, but he was too angry to explain. He forced a smile. How could I have thought that he would abandon the little guy? Robb showed a self-blaming expression, and his mood was slightly better, but he felt powerless after being scolded for saving someone. Ugh. Master Luwin finally arrived in the might after seeing the body of the woman bitten by Grey Wind. Theon was not feeling well either. Perhaps because he was too disappointed, he didn't feel anything special about the body with intestines strutting. He just felt sad. Robb questioned the captain of the guards. "Halloran, this ungrateful guy actually pushed the responsibility on him." Seeing Robb's eyes, he completely lost the strength to defend himself. "Whatever. My lord, spare me." The dark figure on the ground shouted loudly. It was a woman, ragged, with a broken helmet and an iron spear rolling around her. The woman was very tall, but very thin. "My lord, spare me, I was forced." "Kill her and hang their heads on the city wall." He decided to vent his anger, but it was just a female wildling. Robb showed a look of fear. Although it was only for a moment, he could still see it. "She is a woman." Robb hesitated. I knew that this guy couldn't walk when he saw a woman. He didn't want to see what this woman looked like. "My lord, they are men in black." According to the rules, deserters from the wall must be executed. 4 more bodies were found. It was hard to imagine how Robb and Grey Wind did it. "The Black Crows don't accept women. I'm from outside the wall. Don't kill me. I'm very useful. I'm yours, my lord. I will do anything you need me to do." The female wildling screamed hysterically, which was very unpleasant. But Robb's expression relaxed. This kid softened. "Take her and let the law enforcer deal with it. If she deserves to die, I will deal with it myself." After giving a brief order, Robb picked up little Bran and rode away. "Don't bury the bodies. Let the beasts deal with them. These guys don't deserve to have a grave," he said to the captain of the guards, and his good mood of capturing prey was swept away. Life is so boring. There was only one brothel in Winterfell, and Theon asked the most popular Rose to serve him. The money was paid by the dwarf of Stannis' family, in return for his introduction to Rose. After the service, the two talked about the dwarf. "I'm curious how he does it. He can't reach it." Before Rose kicked him out of bed, he needed to find some topics that would interest her. She was not cheap, and her one-time fee was equivalent to his expenses for several months. "Oh, don't worry about that. Lord Tyrion is not only generous, but also good at expressing love with his fingers, and he is much better than you in other aspects." Rose's longing look made him feel uncomfortable. Rose deliberately used words to provoke him to leave, and he felt warmed. "You're joking, not to mention his disabled body. As the second son of Lord Tywin, his status is not comparable to me, the heir of the Greyjoy family, not to mention me. Can he really satisfy you?" Hoping to have another good time, he decided to put aside his pride and adopt a strategy of pestering. HMPH. Rose's contemptuous laughter was very hurtful. She was just prettier and had a better figure. Did she really think that all men would buy into her? "You are not even a little bit inferior to Mr. Little Devil. I'm not just talking about status. The dwarf is very rich. There are more things besides money that attract me. What about you? Just a hostage. Maybe your father has already forgotten about you." What really hurt people was not her words, but her eyes and tone. He pinched her neck. "No matter how I am better than Little Devil, I am still superior to you. As long as I move my hands, your head will no longer be on your neck." He tried to control his anger. If he killed a woman here, he would not only be punished by Robb, but he would also become a laughingstock. How could anyone understand how deeply this woman hurt him? You wouldn't dare. Every time you smile like that, it's just to make people treat you better, to be able to integrate into the Stark wolf pack, but unfortunately, you're not a wolf, never will be, they won't accept you." Rose said all these words at once, holding the hand that was strangling her neck. The hurtful words drained his strength, and he sat down in frustration. "You hurt my heart. Can't you have some professional ethics?" He stared at her sadly like an abandoned puppy. "As long as I can pay, I can comfort you again." Rose glanced at him. He sighed. "I hate powerful women, the most. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelas. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42. Black Mist Entanglement. Sig's official identity is a sword dancer, the prince's swordsmanship teacher, the dame of Windsor Castle, and the attendant of Violet Baratheon. With Violet's identity and her inexplicable popularity, he was also at home in King's Landing. Not only was he able to enter and leave the Red Keep freely, but when walking around the city, the Golden Robes would even take the initiative to say hello. He goes out and about every day, but he doesn't just watch things happen. Explore every corner of the city with those eyes that see through the essence of things. The one on the left of the three hills occupied by King's Landing belongs to the craftsmen. Craftsman streets are built along gradually steeper hillsides. Located at the top of the hill, it is a magnificent building that belongs to Toad Mort, the weapons master of King's Landing. The armor and weapons produced in his shop were famous for their quality, and it was a place frequented by the royal family and nobles. Sig didn't ride his horse, wore a light silk coat with a crowned stag emblem and an ordinary longsword, and came to Toad Mort's shop as if he were shopping. He looked up at the towering shop like a castle, listening to the rhythmic knocking sound coming from inside, and his eyes were filled with darkness. It's not that the air is impenetrable. The time and space here is abnormal, and the black mist-like space-time energy is rolling in violent changes. He seemed casual, but in fact he entered the shop with rare vigilance. There were very few people in the store. The young waitress in charge of cleaning was about to greet him when she saw him coming in, but then she found his badge and stumbled away. The crowned stag badge is a wordless calling card. He looked around, touched, and felt the products that represented the world's highest level of casting technology. According to his understanding, this world has magic, and there is also a sword called the Veil, an artifact. There are no magical fluctuations seen here. Whether it is armor or swords, although they are of good quality, they cannot be called treasures. The back door of the shop opened, and an old man wearing a silk robe and an apron, who looked somewhere between clean and messy, came in. This man was tall and thin, with dry and dull skin, small eyes, and very sharp eyes. He moved up and down a lot of Sigs, his expression changed, and he changed into an apologetic look in just a few breaths. Haha, sir, I don't know which adult sent you here. Were you customizing armor or making weapons? He said. Rubbing his hands together, he said with a professional smile, I think your lord has very high requirements and has a unique view on quality. But please don't worry, this is the best blacksmith shop in King's Landing. 2 days ago, Lord Rennie came from the green breastplate I bought here is not bragging. No one in the 7 kingdoms can make armor at the quality. The green color is not enamel, but is made with an exclusive formula that mixes special raw materials into fine steel. Yes, and what Lord Stannis did, it's mixed with copper, dear Mr. Mott. The old blacksmith shut up with a light word. He focused his gaze behind Toad, looking for the source of the black mist. I have seen almost all of your products, and they are pretty good for ordinary armors and weapons. He emphasized the word ordinary. The old blacksmith's brows twitched slightly and the corners of his mouth turned up. If there's anything outstanding about you, your ability is mainly focused on appearance. You can provide ceremonial equipment for adults that participate in ceremonies. As for other things, he shook his head to express his disapproval. The thin face was elongated. Since you are not here to take care of the store's business, please come back. Looking at old Bzarm pointed straight at the door, he approached the old man's ear and whispered softly, I'm here. Considering that your business scope is vast, you not only customize armors and weapons, but you also seem to like to take in some children but by adults. Toad lost his expression, as if he was wearing a mask. I don't understand what you are talking about. How many gold dragons will the adult give you? The total cost of an apprentice's food and accommodation will not exceed 1 gold dragon per year, and the price you charge is more than 10 times the cost. Do you really think this money is easy to make? The soft drizzle was like a thunderstorm and thunder, and the old blacksmith's body kept shaking. I won't embarrass you, and I also ask you to take me to meet him. He carefully discerned the old man's expression. I am definitely not the first person to come to see him, and I will not be the last one. I dare to ask him, promise, you won't offend anyone who comes to see him. With beads of sweat covering his bald head, the old man led him into the workshop behind him under the surprised gaze of the maid. Each forge is filled with orange-red molten iron, and blacksmiths are crowded around the furnaces working in 2s and 3s. The two of them walked very deep. There is a separate small workshop where a young man is sweating profusely. He is tall, muscular and has thick black hair. Do you want to call? No. Sig decisively stopped the old blacksmith. What he saw was the chaotic future of young people. Due to his and Violet's intervention, the world is undergoing irreversible changes. Although on the surface nothing seems to have happened, if you observe these key figures, you will find that their fate is no longer certain. His name is Gendry. I don't know anything about his life, but please don't worry. The old man seemed to intend to reveal the truth, and began to tell the truth without being asked. Sig stretched out his hand to stop him from continuing. Dear Mr. Mott, for your own safety, it's better to say less. His name is Gendry, and he has the blood of kings. When the old blacksmith heard the next half of the sentence, he couldn't stop his body. Trembling, I remind you, you have taken on a problem, and you can't throw it away yet. If you are found to be trying to do something back to him, he stretched out his hand and made a cutting gesture on his neck. The old man was sweating like rain. I'll give you a piece of advice. Once the situation changes drastically, you will definitely know when it is. Send the boy away immediately and let the night watchman help take care of him. If another big shot comes to see him, tell the truth and send him to the Great Wall. After saying this, looking in the direction of Gendry, the black haze on his body became much thinner. I hope the abnormal gap is not too big, he said softly to himself. What, sir? The old blacksmith used honorifics to him. If you want to live longer, control your curiosity and mouth. Turn around and left the old blacksmith's workshop. This is not the only unusual breach that needs to be repaired. There are many areas where many more people are involved. All the romantic lands in King's Landing belong to Littlefinger. This isn't a secret, it's common sense. Like all young attendants, he came to one of the houses with a wistful look on his face. Of course, he didn't come here just to do something, nor did he choose a house at random. There was a tangle of black mist here that ordinary people couldn't see. By mastering everything that happens in the tangled area of black mist, he can control the direction of history. His actions seem random, but in fact he deliberately avoided the eyes and ears of many people, including the Queen, Octopus and Littlefinger. King's Landing is a huge spider web with many intelligent spies and eyes and ears. He must be careful to avoid people who may be interested in him or Violet. He must do this work himself. Violet is too upright to do this. This is not a question of ability, but a consideration of character. Whenever he was troubled by trivial matters related to intelligence, he thought about finding another helper. Considering that another soul was taken out of the reincarnation of heaven, he couldn't bear it. The idea of adding new companions was deeply entangled in his heart. Approaching Fen Beauty, I saw Kiali, the Prime Minister's guard captain. Avoiding Kiali's sight, he pretended to be an ordinary guest and walked inside. This is a regular building, with the interior decorated in a beautiful pink color. The maid came up to greet him, and he used a few copper coins to silence her. Like an old pro, I found a seat for myself in the corner of the lobby and sat down, pretending to be tasting the girls going in and out. The situation here was complicated, and he decided not to make any big moves, but to focus all his energy on his ears. At the core of the tangled black mist, located in a room on the second floor, intermittent voices came from. How dare you, Caitlin, do this? Sorry, I am more concerned about her safety. The intense conversation came from Eddard Stark and Littlefinger. There were others in the room. He was sure Catelyn was among them, and Sir Oderix. His voice became lower, and he sensed the Valyrian dagger, the treasure used to assassinate Bran, which was the true core of the black mist. As the dagger appeared, the sound could not be leaped. He could only guess through a few words in his rough estimate of the cause and effect that Caitlin was explaining the origin of the dagger to her husband. Due to Quirrellmist's relationship, he was sure that this was a very important meeting. The outcome of the meeting will affect history and push the situation to develop in the established direction. If he desperately rushes upstairs and takes away the dagger now, fundamental changes may occur in the future. Too bad he couldn't do that. The devil always has a way to use conflicts between people, relationships between groups, and 2 or 3 accidents that put everything back on track, just like what happened in previous worlds. He must endure until the network he and Violet worked so hard to build takes shape before he can destroy key core items or events. Even the source of disaster is unable to change the development of the situation. Chapter 43. Riding the World's Horse. Dothraki, the city of the Horse Kings. Drogo had come to the foot of the Mother Mountain more than once. This city belonged to the Dothraki. This was the holy place for all Dothraki. He led the way, and the Blood Riders behind him leapt and roared. Every time he returned here with a larger and larger khalasar, he was more respected. In recent times, some people have called him the Khal of all Dothraki. On the way to the center of the city, where the Dothraki gathered, in addition to the weeds, there were countless sculptures of guards and heroes from other tribes that had been stored here for a long time. These were either majestic or solemn, or weird and exaggerated. The cold dead things stared at everyone who entered through the horse gate with indifferent eyes. He used to be able to feel the discomfort of being watched, but as his power expanded, this feeling gradually faded and finally disappeared. Legend has it that this is a trial path. If someone who enters the city of the Horse King does not feel the gaze of the fallen gods, it means that he has been accepted by the Mother and will rule the Dothraki grasslands. So far, no Khal has been able to do this. Drogo hopes that the legend is true, and that he will be the first to unify the Dothraki grasslands. He has ambitions, not only to rule the grasslands, but also to cross the City of Bones, conquer the Red Waste, and take his khalasar to the Shadowland. He has never shared his thoughts with others. He gradually feels the loneliness of a king. Even the Bloodriders cannot understand his heart. As he becomes increasingly lonely, he may welcome a natural companion, his moon and stars, the alien Khaleesi carrying his child. If it is a healthy and strong boy, he will share his ambitions with him, and perhaps he will not be able to fulfill his long-cherished wish when he grows old, and his son will continue. The closer he gets to the residence of the Dothraki, more and more people appear. The eunuchs in silk bowed to him, which is a ritual to expect him to lay down his weapons. Drogo did so. The Dothraki are the Khaleesi of the generations of Khals, representing the wisdom of the Dothraki people, and he will not despise the opinions of the Dothraki. This time when he returned to Dothraki, his main purpose was to let the Dothraki Khaleesi see his Khaleesi, so that they could see through the mist of time and foresee the future of the child in their belly. His khalasar was too large, and it took 2 days to squeeze into Dothraki. During this time, he and his Bloodriders met with the Dothraki Khaleesi, offering them gifts of salt, oil, silk, cattle and sheep, etc. and expressed his wishes. The Dothraki Khaleesi did not respond immediately, but asked him to go to the holy mountain to worship. Drogo was a little worried, because his Khaleesi was not a Dothraki, but a Westradic from the west of the Narrow Sea, and she claimed to be a descendant of dragons. Illyria of Pentos repeatedly assured him that she was of noble status and a princess of the Westradic people, but whether his words were true or not, the promises of merchants were as unworthy of mention as horse manure, and he was not confident that Khaleesi really had noble blood. Another problem was that she was a foreigner who claimed to be a descendant of dragons. Their children would ride dragons in the future, but he had never heard of humans being able to control dragons. Moreover, dragons had disappeared for hundreds of years. If the gods disliked dragons, would they not be able to accommodate the descendants of dragons? He prayed in his heart that the gods would be more favorable to his moon and stars. Our children just need to ride horses. He muttered to himself and took the blood guards to worship the holy mountain, hoping that his voice could be conveyed to the gods. After a night of prayer, Drogo did not feel tired at all. He left the holy mountain. The Doshi Kalim accepted his proposal and would conduct the prophecy ceremony, but they also proposed that Khaleesi needed to pass the horse heart test. Drogo was very happy. He told Khaleesi the good news and asked all the khalasar to bless Khaleesi. His Khaleesi had been preparing for the horse heart test for many days. The slave girls had prepared raw horse meat with blood since the day before yesterday for her to get familiar with the taste of horse heart. She had not eaten for the whole day for the trial, so that the hunger would make her more willing to eat horse hearts. Although he was a little worried about starving the child, he could understand Khaleesi's feelings. For her, the result of the horse heart trial was everything. He hoped that she could pass the trial. As he lived with her, he became more and more obsessed with her. It was to the point that if he didn't see her for a day, his head was full of Khaleesi's shadow. He couldn't live without her. There would be no problem with a mere horse heart trial. He kept cheering himself up and praying for her. This was the most grand horse heart trial he had ever witnessed. Around the tent, tens of thousands of Khalasar's tribesmen gathered to pray for Khaleesi. Inside the tent, including himself, the blood guards, and the other 2 Khals who happened to be in Dothraki, there were also a large number of Doshi Kalim. These old Europeans were dressed in gorgeous clothes and had masks painted with bright colors on their faces. They sat cross-legged in an orderly manner opposite Khaleesi, chanting something. The 2 oldest and most noble Doshi Kalim held the heart of the horse that had just been dug out. Khaleesi stood up slowly. The child was already big, her belly was bulging, and her movements were no longer light. She was very nervous and kept looking around. It was a pity that the Knight of her clan could not enter the tent, otherwise he would always be able to enlighten her. Drogo realized that he was also very nervous. He accidentally tangled his hands together, a movement that only women would make. Forcing his hands to separate, he held his breath and watched the trial proceed. If Khaleesi could eat the whole horse heart without spitting out any pieces of meat, it meant that the child in her belly was a healthy and strong boy. If she couldn't do it, it was an ominous sign, and even meant that the child was a girl. She held the horse heart with both hands and tried to bite the horse heart that was too muscular. Blood dripped from her chin and elbows. She, who was beautiful with a light and slender face, became ferocious and strong. She used her nails and teeth to tear off pieces of muscle and even stronger fascia. He forgot his identity and clenched his fists, as if he was trying to chew this huge piece of meat. She must have choked. She didn't have such a big appetite normally. She would hurt her fingers. He was on the verge of madness, and he was more nervous than ever in the most difficult battle. He locked eyes with her, and she saw his nervousness and smiled at him. He was ashamed of his weakness. His moon and stars, Khaleesi's eyes were full of determination. She was like a raka in the desert, tearing the food into pieces with her claws when eating, and her cheeks covered with blood were intimidating. Finally she raised the empty tray. The Blood Riders whispered, and the Doshi Khalim chanted spells in unison. Suddenly, she bent down and pretended to vomit. The tent was silent, and the Doshi Khalim spells were stuck in their throats. Countless eyes gathered on her. He was worried and sad for her. She straightened up again. He saw it clearly, and nothing came out of her little mouth. "This is a burp. Next time you should find a smaller horse," he said to the Doshi Khalim beside him. The little old woman chanted the spell seriously, and seemed not to hear what he said. As the ceremony continued, the heads of the Doshi Khalim swayed like grass blown by the wind. The old eyes were pale and hoarse. His heart was lifted again. What if the prophecy was a girl? Or the descendants of dragons were not under the care of the guards of the holy mountain? He kept clenching his fists, and his palms were full of sweat. The spell stopped. The oldest Doshi Khalim shouted in a trembling and dry voice, "I saw the child. He is the horse riding the world." The other old women continued to shout, "The horse riding the world, he is coming." She stood up, blood dripping from the corner of her mouth. "I feel him, it's a boy, the horse riding the world." Everyone sang, "The horse riding the world." The whole Wysnoskara echoed with a voice, "The horse riding the world. The horse riding the world." The whole Drogo khalasar was boiling. "Khal Drogo and my child are the horses that ride the world. His name is Roegel." Khaleesi called out a strange name. She knew how to pronounce Go, but she didn't know where the pronunciation of Ray came from. Roegel. Roegel. The Doshi Khalil, the Blood Riders, and then the entire khalasar. Roegel's name resounded throughout the Horse King city. Ningmi held the two of them in her arms. She held him like a baby. "Why is he called Roegel? Is there any meaning? My brother died in battle before I was born. He was the last dragon rider, and his name was Roeger." Chapter 44 The Prince's Request. It was the first time that Joffrey met his father alone for his own affairs. He silently recited the Knight's Creed, thinking that Violet was beside him. "At worst, I'll get beaten up and lose 2 more teeth. That will become my medal." He patted his cheek and repeated. He had prepared for today's meeting for 5 days, and was ridiculed by Arya as the most timid knight. Before entering the royal council hall, he sneered at Arya's words, and even imagined Arya's smile after seeing that he had obtained the study permit. Entering the solemn meeting place, under the gaze of the ministers, he turned back into the most timid knight, and even Varys' gaze made him uncomfortable. His father sat in his seat, reeking of alcohol. He flicked through the pile of documents and lost his patience in less than 2 heartbeats. He pushed the mountain of documents to the king's hand. "It's all yours. Get it done. This is the king's order." Robert clapped his hands. "It's done, Baharistan. Let's go hunting. We must kill a damn big pig." Bald-headed Varys bowed. "Your Majesty, I'm afraid His Royal Highness has some small matters to ask for your approval." He spoke slowly, and the smell of incense emanated from his body. Robert frowned, as if he had just seen him. "Joffrey, what are you doing here? I won't allow you to wear a sword without the sword dancer's consent." Under his father's gaze, he almost retreated. Violet's graceful figure floated in front of him, which strengthened his determination. "Father, Your Majesty." He used the most solemn title, hoping to win his father's attention. This was also the special combat method he learned from Violet, prepare the environment through flanking means. His father was stunned, and didn't seem to understand what he meant. Joffrey was encouraged and decided to press on. "Your Majesty, although I got the status of a prince from you by blood, I don't have half of your bravery." He used a tone of respect from the lower to the upper, very solemn. The ministers whispered among themselves. The Prime Minister Lord Stark opened his mouth wide, and even the fearless Barristan widened his eyes. Some say it's because the mother is too doting, and some blame King's Landing for being too peaceful. As the declarative request continued, he became bolder and bolder. "Some even mentioned that you, Father, what about me?" Robert's temper, his big hands on the table, the solid mahogany conference table creaked under the huge force. The Prime Minister whispered, and then he relaxed the strength of his arms, but his face was terribly gloomy. Joffrey's strength was about to be drained. If it weren't for the breathing technique and the essentials of swordsmanship, he would have knelt on the ground and cried. He noticed his changes and looked forward to becoming stronger. It doesn't matter what others say. I don't think my cowardice is someone else's fault. With the strict swordsmanship instruction and constant training these days, I found my changes and came to a conclusion. Did the sword dancer ask you to say this? Littlefinger seemed to be referring to something else. Of course not. He said without hesitation, she won't let me say anything, but will only encourage me to have my own ideas. He straightened his chest, as if he was a giant as tall as his father. Father, your majesty, I admit my cowardice and think I need to travel and experience the wind and rain to make up for this shortcoming. Please grant my request. When I grow up, I will become a loyal and brave knight like Sir Barristan and die for you. He half knelt down and lowered his head to wait for the final result. For a long time, just when he thought the silence would continue, Robert spoke. Unexpectedly, he didn't roar, and even looked less drunk. Who taught you this? You're really not a sword dancer. Father, this is my own expectation. Violet told me that only by becoming the strongest person can you be truly respected and led others. She said that you were once the most powerful warrior in the Seven Kingdoms. You can sit on the throne only if you are obeyed by everyone and respected by all officials. He secretly glanced at his father, and the king's face was expressionless. If I really want to be a good king, I must aim to be a noble and a powerful person when I am young. The atmosphere eased. Your Majesty, although the prince's proposal is abrupt, it represents his ambition, which is commendable. Varys expressed his opinion in a sweet and greasy tone. With fearless Barristan as your idol, the sword warriors have a high opinion of you. Littlefinger teased the captain of the Iron Guard beside him. Traveling outside can also meet more women. Uncle Renly still looked like a handsome young man. The strongest warrior ever, this is how the sword warriors evaluate me, so your target is Barristan, not me. Robert said gloomily. Joffrey felt the temperature drop sharply. He wanted to stand up and answer loudly yes. After all, he didn't have the courage. He didn't even defend Violet. He was too weak and didn't deserve her. He chewed a bitter taste, and the world became gray. The children are right. If we knew you would be so fat, Oberyn and I would not have nominated you. Lord Stark's joke was cold. No one among the ministers responded. Joffrey tried his best to raise his head, his eyes widened, in order to prevent tears from falling. Ha 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 ha, didn't expect it, I'm so fat. So you guys who nominated me have to bear the fat, drunken king. Lord Stark left. Then Renly, Barristan, Littlefinger, Grand Maester and Varys all left. Robert looked at him. Is it funny? There was no smile in his eyes. At least it's funny now. He tried his best to pretend that he didn't care. He was full of admiration for the fact that the ministers could control themselves under the pressure of their father. It won't be fun when the little guy grows up. Even scaring him won't work. Robert said frustratedly. He was not sure if the so-called little guy referred to himself. The child will grow up eventually. I'm beginning to envy you. Our Rob doesn't have such courage. The look that Lord Stark gave him was full of various meanings and very complicated. His father strode over, and the floor shook with him. Joffrey straightened his back, ready to take a heavy blow. He was prepared to have his teeth knocked out again, or even be knocked unconscious. Never show weakness, he said in his heart. The heavy blow still came, but it was different from what he imagined. He felt a deep concern. He had never thought that his father had such a kind side. Stinky boy, letting the sword dancer be your master is the most correct decision I made. Okay, I promise you, I'll give you 2 years. Come back to me before you come of age. Don't have too many illegitimate children. It will be difficult to arrange for them in the future. The important ministers laughed and the atmosphere relaxed. Joffrey stood up and sighed. By the way, my son, does your mother know about this? Suddenly remembering something, Robert's eyebrows were deep with vertical lines. Also, the funding, I can't let you be too poor. If people know that the prince begs for a living, I will be laughed to death by the Lannisters. My mother doesn't know the idea of traveling, I don't want her to worry. Besides, this is my own business. It only took the father a blink of an eye for his frown to turn into a hearty laugh. Start boy, look, this is my son. My own, with courage. Duke Stark smiled with a complicated expression, always feeling that there was something else in his smile. Just take more money. I will buy on credit from your Lannister grandfather. Anyway, I already owe several million, so I don't care about more. I really envy you. When I was young, I traveled abroad. I was a beggar with your Uncle Stark, begging for a living. There was a strong sense of regret in his expression. What are your plans? Where do you want to go? Joffrey was flattered by his father's concern for him, and the warmth was as thick as honey. I have a detailed plan, and I will definitely not stay in the homes of guardians, lords, and nobles. Since I am traveling, I must hide my identity, put on makeup and travel around the 7 kingdoms as a free rider, and try my best to avoid disputes among nobles. The royal family needs to treat subordinates fairly. It is better to leave these matters to my father to decide. His face flushed red, and he tried his best to avoid his tongue-tying. What he said was trivial, and he even felt incoherent. You're good at finding things for Dad. Robert nodded, and he was no longer drunk. This was the first time Joffrey saw him so happy. You need a squire. Do you have a candidate? The sword dancer is not good. She is a woman. I mean, Robert lowered his head in thought and moved closer. Robert seemed to avoid the Prime Minister on purpose. I understand you are interested in her. In fact, it is okay to ask her to be a lover. You are still young. Don't always bring the housekeeper around. A short absence is better than a new love, you know. His father's words were vulgar, but he was almost moved to tears. He held back his sobs. I have a candidate. The man is called Sig. He is her squire knight, very capable and experienced. She recommended him to me. Bring him to me to see. Robert turned to Lord Stark. You also come to consult, and tell me according to your honor-wood standards, whether the person can be trusted. Chapter 45 Father and Son. This was the first time Robert refused to drink since he ascended the throne. What? You want me to get drunk to death? He waved his fist at the blonde servant and watched him run away and feel like a frightened deer. Damn Lannister, if you were all like this, maybe it wouldn't be so bad. He couldn't help laughing when he imagined Tressel showing a cowardly expression in front of him. A person's laughter echoed in the palace. He shook his head in boredom. I've finally come to this. He looked at his stomach with disgust, and he couldn't see his toes when he stood up straight. Why is this happening? He didn't waste any more time on wine. There are important things to do today, and he must dress neatly and keep his mind clear. Your Majesty, you are looking for me. Ned stared at him with dead fish eyes and walked in with a look of deep hatred. It must be tough lately. This country is just like me, rotting in decadence. If you hope to turn the tide, you'd better make my belly smaller first. He felt refreshed, watching the serious guy worry about the impossible, and felt the pleasure of revenge, letting you put the blame on me. Oberyn was worried before, and now it's Stark's turn. He privately thought that either of them would be more suitable for this position than himself. He was not comfortable on the Iron Throne at all, and he didn't miss it. Dress up and go out with me to meet someone. Ned just looked at him. I'm dressed up. It's your turn, Your Majesty. It was really infuriating. We were the same age, but after 18 years, I became fat, panting when I got on and off the horse, while Ned still looked the same. If it weren't for the white hair on his temples and the deep wrinkles on his face, he would have not changed at all. Ned looked behind him. Why don't I see your attendants? The new Prime Minister thought seriously for a while. I always feel that something is strange today. Of course, idiot. I didn't drink. You never thought that I wouldn't drink. He fiercely responded to this idiot who didn't give the king any face, and he began the arduous process of dressing. It's not a formal dress. Why is it so tight? After finally putting on his clothes, Ned watched the shoulders early like a tired dog. Hey, old friend, you see I'm in trouble, and you don't know to come and help. I am your king. I order you to come. Yes, Your Majesty. Ned's half-smile was unpleasant to the eye. Your Majesty is so serious. Who are you going to meet today? I don't think you need to dress like this to recognize the bastard. Huh. Finally buttoned up all the buttons, Robert sighed. Do you think I'm the Marquis of Frey? I do have a lot of bastards, and each of them has appropriate arrangements. He glanced at Ned. But Duke Stark, your bastard, why don't you stay with you? You know how much he looks like you. I'm going to give him a chance. Maybe he can set up his own business. Ned was like an old dog who finally found his owner. That look was really unbearable. Okay, I know it's not easy for you. Look at what honor and duty have squeezed you into. You should despise them, like me, so that you can get fat in the end. Robert could only take on the role of the funny man. He really didn't know who was the king. When the two were together, Robert was always responsible for making jokes. He liked this distribution of tasks. If Ned was the king, he would be the prime minister. The king was busy and the prime minister was responsible for making jokes. This was the most suitable arrangement. The two of them traveled light. Although doubted that there was anyone in the city who didn't know him, he felt relieved without the troublesome people from the Lannister family. The destination was the large parade ground outside the Red Castle. As more and more people followed Joffrey to practice swordsmanship, the small parade ground could not accommodate them. A month ago, they moved to a large parade ground that could accommodate the army. The weather was very hot, and wearing light casual clothes made people sweat all over. Damn summer. He looked at the blue sky and couldn't help cursing. Look who the gods have spared. The king has to endure the heat like peddlers. Ned rode side by side and fell behind slightly. This guy never knows how to relax. The long summer has lasted for 10 years. It is said that when the long summer ends, the heat of the year will be unbearable. The northerners call this kind of weather the ghost of summer. I know, winter is coming. You guys. You keep saying this all the time, no wonder you are so sad. The big parade ground is right in front of us. In addition to the knights and soldiers who line up for daily training, the largest circle is surrounded by children in gorgeous clothes. Robert urged his horse to run ahead. When he met officers and soldiers along the way, they all bowed without exception. It seems that many people in the barracks know the king. 2 teenagers in the circle are competing. Among them is his son Joffrey, and the other one is actually Arya. Hey, your tomboy dares to go against the prince. Robert turned around and saw Ned's bitter smile. Your Majesty, the little girl is wild. If she is not restrained, she dares to urinate on my head. Haha, she really looks like Anna when she was a child. Maybe Joffrey is obsessed with her instead of Sansa. He felt inexplicably excited in his heart and didn't want to disturb the 2 young people. Ned stopped his horse and watched side by side with him. Both of them used wooden swords. Joffrey was a head taller than Arya and had the body of an adult. The little girl was thin and looked like she would be blown by the wind. The situation of the 2 people on the scene was exactly the opposite of their bodies. Arya took light and gorgeous steps, as fast as the wind, as if gliding on the water, and launched attacks from all directions. On the other side, the tall and handsome prince was on the defensive. His skin was tan and his expression was focused on dealing with the waves of attacks from the little girl. Well, Syrio didn't slack off. Ned said proudly. TSK, the sword dancer is not bad either. Look at Joffrey's defense. She's going to counterattack soon. He had a spirit of not admitting defeat in his heart, and he also approved of Joffrey's strategy. The little girl's swordsmanship was obviously inherited from the Baratheon style, and she took a light route, but it required a lot of physical strength and agility. If he met a Baratheon master of the same level, he would also take a defensive position and wait for an opportunity. They rode on horses, standing outside the circle. No one saw them, and only heard the cheers and cheers from the children. Joffrey staggered and seemed to be unable to stand firmly. Arya approached and stabbed him repeatedly at a speed that was so fast that Robert could hardly see clearly, but she missed unexpectedly. It turned out that Joffrey rolled on the ground and came to Arya's side. Little girl, watch this. Joffrey swung the wooden sword horizontally, but missed. Arya used her clever body skills to get to his side and back, and a series of stabs made the tall Joffrey exhausted. That's it. The sword dancer who had been watching the match silently paused. She looked in Robert's direction and was stared at by the sapphire eyes. Robert blushed in shame. Considering Jacques' feelings for her, Robert turned his head away uncomfortably. You can't beat her. The speed and agility are too different. I will let Sig help you make up for the gap in this area, but you have to work hard on your own. She bowed to Robert while preaching. At this time, everyone on the field saw the 2 people on horseback, and they all bowed in fear. Little girl, you are fooled. How many times have I told you to be perceptive, use your eyes and listen with your ears? He didn't make any mistakes and suddenly stumbled. It was an obvious trap. This is a lesson. The Baratheon saluted the 2 men in an exaggerated manner. My lords, they are most outstanding students. This is a small contest between the sword warrior and the water dancer. I hope it will catch your eyes. Ned, you look honest on the surface, but you have a lot of tricks up your sleeve. Even the chief swordsman of the Sea King has been invited. He looked at the short Baratheon man. The little girl you trained is good. In your opinion, who was stronger between you and the sword warrior? The short swordsman raised his head. Of course it's me, your majesty, but you always have to give beautiful ladies some opportunities on the scene. Oh, sword dancer, do you agree with the Baratheon man's point of view? Violet shrugged noncommittally. Your majesty, let's talk about it after he defeats my squire first. Robert dismounted, walked into the circle, and first touched Arya's head. You are so good at fighting, which noble son will dare to marry you in the future? I won't marry, I want to be a lord. Arya vowed, attracting laughter from the people around her. Why are you laughing? Isn't Violet also a lord? The laughter stopped abruptly. Robert came to his son and patted his shoulder. Joffrey tried to straighten his body, so Robert used his true strength. His son just swayed between the pats, and he was completely different from the soft ebb before. This is his son, his seed. Well done, the little girl is not weak. If she is equipped with heavy armor, you don't need to worry so much. He approached his son and whispered. The two looked at Arya sideways. It is necessary to become stronger, otherwise how can you control a strong woman? Wandering around the world, wielding a sword, and taking revenge is a life that makes people yearn for. I really want to give up everything and become a ranger. Joffrey said yearningly. Ha 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 ha. Robert laughed wildly, and then whispered. Your father thought so too. If he hadn't been framed by your Uncle Stark, he would have been famous in the free trade city. The father and son nodded in tacit understanding. Life is so happy, there is nothing else to ask for. Chapter 46. Second Robert Seat was dressed in a squire's uniform, with the crowned stag of the Baratheon family embroidered on his chest. He walked casually in the passage made by the crowd. At the end of the passage was the king and the prime minister with a complicated look. In his eyes, the king and the prime minister had two different looks. The ordinary naked eye saw a fat man and a gloomy person. The heart's eye saw a brave warrior and a lonely knight. He even saw the death of the two. Soon they will leave this world and return to the sea of life again. It is not the first time for the two to leave, nor will it be the last time. The same history repeats itself, and so does the tragic fate of the two. Robert was cut open from the abdomen to the chest, and his internal organs flowed out. He still had that arrogant and unyielding attitude, but he had to fall down in the end. Edward was even worse. He lost his head. His head with many expressions such as resentment, anger, sadness and regret was stuck on the tip of the spear and exposed to wine and grain. Even after so many changes, the death of the two is still a foregone conclusion. The grey mist of time and space around them was not turbid, which meant that Sigurd and Violet's efforts could not affect their fate. Kneel down before the king. Robert shouted. Sigurd knelt on one knee with a smile on his face. Your Majesty, I was born in the countryside and have never seen the world. Please forgive me if I offend you. A countryman would never say such a thing. Robert walked in front of him. Like a giant, he looked down at him. Tell me why Joffrey chose you as his squire. You encouraged him, didn't you? The king's soft voice was more frightening than his roar. Father, Violet stopped Joffrey from defending him. Sigurd nodded to the prince, and he stood up calmly. Did I ask you to stand up? The king stared with a ferocious look, and the nobles and young ladies who were watching retreated one after another. You didn't ask me to kneel all the time. The smile was always maintained on his face. He wanted King Robert to know that pretense would not scare him. You bewitched my son and wanted to take the throne. The prime minister remained silent, but Robert's eyes were full of anger. It's true that you wanted to take the throne. It's not strange for a man to travel around and help the prince after he grows up to become famous. I didn't bewitch the prince, I just helped him. He speculated about the prime minister's mood with interest. As far as he knew, Eddard Stark had already suspected Oberyn's death and had drawn some conclusions from various intelligence. This was the reason why the prime minister looked at Joffrey with a complicated expression. Is there something on the prime minister's face? Why don't you look at me? Robert's voice was like thunderbolt. I am very interested in the prime minister. He spoke the truth. Excuse me, most of the great men who are upright and honorable, who take their wives as honor and their concubines as obligations, died young, but Lord Stark is still alive today. How can people not be surprised? Watch your words. Robert's tone was full of doubt. You mean, respecting honor and fulfilling obligations is wrong? The prime minister interrupted for the first time. His tone was calm, and he was obviously better at controlling his emotions than the king. Sig shook his head. It's not wrong, it's just that life is not easy. He turned to Robert. Your Majesty, the reason why I assist the prince is not only because of ambition, but also because of my martial arts. He was interrupted and Robert hugged him directly. Then he felt the power that would break bones and tendons of ordinary people. Robert held his breath and his face turned red. The people around were so shocked that they couldn't speak. Sig said slowly. Your Majesty, it's useless. Even if you're in your best condition, you can't win by brute force. Father. Joffrey tried to pull the two apart, but failed. Your Majesty, don't be impulsive. Robert let go after the Prime Minister's efforts. He was still blushing. PFFT, your skills are really not good enough. I think even the bear couldn't stand this hug back then. Your Majesty, please be merciful. Sig lowered his head and gave the king a way out. You must have known my abilities. They should be more than enough to ensure the prince's safety. He winked at Violet as he spoke. Violet stepped forward and said, Your Majesty, the prince is traveling, and it is not convenient for me to follow him. Sigurd is extremely brave and will definitely be able to ensure the safety of His Highness. I won't feel reassured until I see his abilities. Robert turned to the Prime Minister, who greeted the attendants who were following him from a distance. Sigurd knew him, the captain of the guards of Winterfell and the current Prime Minister's captain of guards, Jory Castle. Through Violet's eyes, he knew all the important people in Winterfell. However, he still had to pretend that he was seeing him for the first time and looked up and down at the sharp-eyed knight. "Your Majesty, my lord, what can I do for you?" Jory bowed and saluted. His movements were agile and his eyes were clear. "Try to compete with Sigurd, but don't use too much force." The Prime Minister was very kind and actually ordered him to hold back. Sig was speechless about his nice guy personality. In the Game of Thrones, people like him are rare. Jory drew out his long sword and came to the middle of the circle. People stepped back to make more space. Sign, point 2. Jory stopped talking halfway and opened his mouth like everyone else. Sig drew out a long-handled weapon wrapped in cloth from behind. When the cloth was untied, the dark-colored giant sword stood between the two of them. The giant sword was swung as lightly as an ordinary longsword. The whistling sound of the blade cutting through the air and the phenomenon of the air waves spreading away from the soil where the sword pointed all indicated a powerful force. "Point to point, I understand, be careful." He swung the giant sword as if it was nothing, and his movements were so fast that people could not see clearly. Jory only had time to block with his sword before he was pushed out by the huge force. He fell out of the circle, and the captain of the Prime Minister's guard was confused. The huge sword was inserted into the ground, and the blade sank into the ground 1/3 of the way. At this time, the hilt was at the same height as Sig's shoulder. "Thank you. This sword will be more powerful if used on horseback." The Prime Minister opened his mouth 3 times, but couldn't utter a word. Robert was overjoyed. "What a brave warrior, are you willing to serve the kingdom? I can make you a noble." Sig lowered his head. "I am already serving the kingdom. As for being made a noble, I need the consent of my lord." Joffrey's travel was decided. Considering the safety of the prince, the royal family did not publicize it, and the itinerary was kept secret. The queen was determined to oppose this, but King Robert insisted that she could not control the king's intention. Before dawn, on the King's Road outside King's Landing, Prince Joffrey, Sig and the Hound set off on their journey. "What? Are you scared?" Sig teased the prince. "No, I just find it incredible. The last time I came back, I never thought I would leave again so soon, and in this way." The two rode side by side, and the horses trotted. "In a few days, you will find that the past 10 years have been wasted. The real world is very different from what you thought." Sig waved at the city gate, where Violet, Myrcella and others saw him off. "What's the point of staying in the palace all day? Go to the world with a sword, chop down those you don't like with a sword, and do your best to pursue beautiful girls, so that you can become the favorite of the bard. This is a wonderful life." The prince showed a yearning expression. "If this is really the case, I will thank you for the rest of my life. Where are we going? It's really a pity that you tried so hard to ask to go out. Don't you think about where to go?" Sig almost fell off his horse. The young prince's childishness surprised him. Looking at the horizon, looking for the direction of the entanglement of time and space energy, go to Hegian, where transportation is convenient and people are mixed. It is a good place to gain knowledge. He rode his horse first and galloped towards Hegian, followed by the prince, and the hounds were behind. The two of them galloped and laughed along the way, just like wanderers, enjoying a life of revenge. Chapter 47 River Inn. Joffrey had never been so happy. Ever since he learned sword skills from Violet, his life had changed. After leaving King's Landing, he slept in the open air every day, asking for directions, fighting against bandits when they kidnapped him, and meeting all kinds of people along the way. He finally understood why many big families kept the tradition of sending their children to study abroad. This life was wasted. Looking at Sig, he always had a way to solve problems and he was calm and unhurried. Looking at himself, he thought he could remove any obstacles with his enthusiasm. The fact is that there are few places where force is used. Every time he solves a problem, he uses strategy, skills, and the method of speaking human words to people and speaking devilish words to devils. When he walks outside, he is like a newborn baby, knowing nothing. But he also realized that as long as he has enough experience, he can handle most things with ease. Not long after leaving King's Landing, Joffrey developed the habit of listening more, watching more, and talking less. The life of luxury is like a dream, and he thinks every day that he is becoming more sophisticated and strong. The three of them marched in a small column. Joffrey followed Sig for most of the time, and the Hound was the rear guard. After being targeted by 2 groups of bandits in a row, they took off their fine clothes, put on dirty leather armor, put away their sharp steel blades, and held the tattered weapons seized from the bandits. Only Sig's greatsword was carried on his back, giving people a strong sense of oppression. Joffrey realized that Sig was not aimless. Whenever he looked up at the sky, he could always find the direction to move forward. They first marched along the King's Road, and after encountering bandits, they turned to the path along the river. The road is so chaotic. Pycelle said that the world is peaceful. Sig smiled coldly. If you believe that shameless old man, you might as well believe that a sow can climb a tree. Joffrey, your father is surrounded by flatterers and cunning foxes. If everyone is like Stark, the country will not be like this. What do you mean? Do I need people like Stannis and Ned? He asked seriously, feeling that something was wrong. We need them, but not everyone has to be like that. Sigurd's voice softened. Joffrey had noticed that he would be like this whenever he asked a good question. If it had been an icy face like Stark, or a steely tough guy like Stannis, our dear king would have collapsed long ago. Joffrey tried to imagine the two of them sitting side by side in the court, and couldn't help but shrink his neck. I'm afraid it won't be easy. Haha, that's right. The kingdom needs all kinds of people. Too many of the same kind will be a disaster. He took out his warhammer and struck down. Your father's problem is that there are too many villains and jesters, and your mother's family is too powerful. If it were another way, with Ned and Stannis in control of the government, the kingdom would inevitably be undercurrents. Only responsibility and honor can scare people. Like a magic trick, Sigurd stood up with the corpse of a rabbit in his hand. We can have a feast tonight. It's time to show off his strongest cooking skills in the Seven Kingdoms. Joffrey smiled and agreed, having a strange feeling. The knight in front of him was obviously brave and resourceful, but he was only proud of his cooking skills. Could he be the kind of chef that the wandering bard ridiculed, who was delayed by the knight's profession? In the end, the three of them still didn't find a chance to have a bite to eat. When they were washing the rabbit by the river, garbage from upstream floated down, and Sig concluded that there was an inn nearby. Although camping in the wild was free and attractive, Joffrey still hoped to take a hot bath and sleep on a straw bed after a few days. Sig didn't object, but it was a pity that they missed the chance to taste the delicious roasted rabbit. The three of them went upstream along the path, which soon merged into the King's Road, and then they found a not-so-small inn. The inn was quite crowded, and all kinds of passers-by stopped here to rest, and the aroma of food came from the dining room. Sorry, this place is full. The fat lady boss, whose red teeth were visible when she smiled, said unhappily, if you want to blame someone, blame the damn martial arts tournament. There were a lot of people before it started, and there were a lot of people after it ended. This place is almost overwhelmed. Sig showed the golden dragon. Her eyes turned from contempt to sparkling, and then a smile appeared on her face. Oh, it turns out to be the young masters. Sorry, there are really no guest rooms here. If you really want to stay, I wonder if the warehouse is okay. Sig put the golden dragon in the hands of the lady boss neatly. Tom. Let the guests to the warehouse. Damn it, you are so busy and still don't give me peace of mind. Get down quickly. The guests are here. Under the shouting of the lady boss, the apprentice hurried downstairs and took the two to the guest room. The apprentice led the three people through the long corridor, went down the stairs at the end of the hotel, and then came to the warehouse. There were all kinds of debris piled here, and a piece of open space was cleared out and piled with hay. Without Sig's instruction, Joffrey handed the apprentice a copper coin, who immediately nodded and bowed, reminding them that the meal was about to end and they should go to the dining room to eat first. On the way upstairs and through the long corridor to the dining room, Sig's expression became serious. Be prepared for a fight, something is wrong. Joffrey felt the atmosphere around him suddenly change. Don't reveal your identity, don't talk, follow me. The three of them had already reached a tacit understanding. Joffrey was ready for a fight, and the dog didn't need to be reminded at all, it could kill at any time. When they came to the dining room, they used the copper coin to get a seat next to each other on a long table. Just as they sat down, someone else came in. My lord, we are really full. Even the warehouse is occupied. We really can't take care of you and your servants. The corners of the proprietress's mouth were crooked to her ears, and her blood-red teeth made her face look even more hideous. I don't ask for a good room. Servants can't sleep outdoors. If there's any kind-hearted person who agrees to squeeze in, this is yours. The little devil was wandering around with a gold dragon in his hand, and soon a mercenary agreed to give him a room. He continued to look for a place to eat with a smile, and Joffrey subconsciously lowered his head. Oh, what a coincidence, isn't this Mrs. Stark from Winterfell? It's my honor to meet you here. What surprised Joffrey was that there were other big names here. Mrs. Stark, a serious and capable woman in his memory, how could she be here? Mrs. Stark stood up and lifted her hood. Dear gentlemen, I am Catelyn Tully Stark, the wife of the current Prime Minister Eddard Stark, and the eldest daughter of Duke Hoster Tully of Riverrun. She paced slowly in the dining room. What did she want to do? Yes, dear madam, we all know that you are born noble and have elegant manners. You are a role model for women. The little devil seemed confused. Looking at Mrs. Stark's appearance, it doesn't seem like she wants to entertain him well. The last time I stayed here, I was still Catelyn of the Tully family. She said this to the proprietress, and then walked to the center of the dining room. The two diners tactfully made way. She took a deep breath. The gentleman sitting in the corner, is it the black bag of hair and hull embroidered on your coat? The man quickly stood up and agreed, yes, ma'am. May I ask if Lady Riverend is a loyal ally of my father? Of course she is. The man answered firmly. Lady Stark's companion, an old knight, quietly drew his sword. This is not a good sign. The little devil was still staring at each other in confusion. Joffrey sighed in his heart that if his uncle was really smart, he should turn around and flee now. The family emblem of the Red Horse has always been welcomed in Riverrun. She said to the three people by the fire, the Earl of Bracken has always been my father's right-hand man. The three soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. My master is honored. The leading soldier responded by stroking his chest. Lady Stark, I don't understand why you do this. The little devil's face was full of anxiety. Joffrey looked at Sig for help, and the latter made a calm gesture to him. Lady Stark ignored the little devil. She came to more than 20 people in gray and blue clothes, the twin towers of the Frey family emblem. Sirs, I wonder if your master is in good health recently. One of the leaders stood up and bowed. Lord Walder is in good health. He has decided to marry a new wife on his 90th birthday. I hope you can be there to honor him. There was laughter in the dining room. Mrs. Stark slammed the table hard and pointed at the little devil. This man came to Winterfell as a guest, intending to murder my 7-year-old son. The old knight walked to her side with a sword. In the name of King Robert and the servants, I ask you to help me arrest this man. Dozens of swords were unsheathed, and the little devil's face was ashen. Chapter 48. No one believes one side had more people and more power, with swords and knives. The other side had only 6 people. The sound of weapons clashing was endless. There was indeed no blood. Sig saw that the other side was just pretending. There were many brave knights among them, but the bravest of them were afraid of the crown and stag family emblem on his chest. Fight and retreat. He stood at the front, or at the back of the team. With a light swing of the greatsword, some people's weapons broke or flew away. Respected sirs, please don't fight in the store, our store can't afford it. The landlady cried, her red teeth, turning the plea into a ferocious threat. The Hound and Joffrey stood on both sides. They were on guard with swords. Although some people pretended to stab with long swords, they were just pretending. Even if they had spears, they had to lean into the killing range of the greatsword before fighting with the two men. No one was stupid enough to want to offend the Baratheon family. The little devil stayed in the middle, and his 2 men waved steel swords to force back those who blocked their way. They left the inn without any danger. Sig's round sword hit the pillar of the porch heavily. Amidst screams, the inn's lobby collapsed with half of the porch. You two go and drive away the horses outside. Try to target war horses or camels. Don't worry about the plow horses. The Hound ordered the imp's men to run around. When Sig retreated, the 6 horses were ready. Curses came from the back door of the inn. The 6 people got on the horses, and Sig whistled and led the way. They could only gallop eastward. Respected sir, I am very grateful for your courage. The Lannisters will repay you, but you are heading east now. The adults in the Yarrang Valley don't seem to be very friendly to the Lannisters. The imp caught up and persuaded with a frown. Sig understood what he meant. It would be better to go west, or at least south. He shook his head. He couldn't tell him the specific reason, and he couldn't explain it clearly. If he took the little devil to the south, he could indeed escape the pursuit. As long as he left the River Erlands, no one would arrest the Lannisters for honor, not to mention that Catelyn's accusation was one-sided. But he couldn't do that. The gray space-time energy extended to the east, and the little devil had to take this road, so that their fate would not get out of control. What Sig pursued was to get rid of the malicious manipulation of the root of the disaster and restore the world to its original appearance, rather than let the world fall into chaos. He saw the doubt in Joffrey in the Hound's eyes, made a gesture, and the 6 riders accelerated into a sparse forest. Signaled the servants of the little devil to be alert. Joffrey and the Hound took off their disguises, and the little devil showed an expression of disbelief. God bless me, are you here to save me? I'm sorry, no. You ruined my travel plan. Joffrey stared at the little devil with disgust. From his reaction, it can be seen that the relationship between the two is very bad. Oh, Robert finally changed his mind and rescued you from my overly doting sister. The little devil found a stump and sat down. Hound, I know this greatsword knight with the family emblem of the crowned stag. I have never seen him before. May I ask your name? Sig did not hesitate for too long. Watch it, don't be too surprised, and don't be impulsive. Joffrey and the Hound showed doubtful expressions. He said this to the three people at the same time. He removed the cover of the hair in black color, and the three people were surprised. Are you a wizard? The little devil stared at him with his big and small eyes. The hound drew his sword without saying a word, and the murderous aura on him suddenly increased. Joffrey's face was filled with astonishment and disbelief. Sig, he put down his greatsword, walked directly to the hound, and put the tip of his sword against his chest. What do you think will happen if you stab him with a sword? The world will be free of many troubles. The remnants of the Targaryen family will never cause trouble again, Viserys. The hound's words hit Joffrey hard. He took a step back, looking alternately at Sig and the hound. You're only half right. The world will lose a Targaryen, but nothing will change. This man, he pointed at himself, he has great ambitions but little talent, and he has no self-knowledge. If I hadn't controlled this body, he would have died on the dog-rocky grasslands. He is too despicable, and his death is as light as a feather. Nothing will change in the world. At most, his sister will shed a few tears. What a poor and hateful guy. Wait a minute, this gentleman doesn't seem to want to fight, and I don't want my savior to be killed. Although the little demon was only half the height of a person, he walked in front of the two and pushed away the hound's sword. He called to Joffrey, my dear nephew, you sit down too. Let's have a good rest. I think Mr. Sig has something to say to us. Sig watched with interest the little devil's efforts to ease the atmosphere. The dwarf was smarter and wiser than he thought. The most valuable thing was that he had a sense of the overall situation, which was beyond the emotions of ordinary people, so that he could always walk on the most correct path. He returned to his horse and took out the treasured wine. Hey, you two, don't need to look out. I will know if someone approaches this place. The two servants looked at them uncertainly. Come on, I told you not to look out. The little devil took the initiative to greet the two servants. The 6 people sat in a circle. Sig took a sip of the wine back first, then handed it to the little devil. The little devil imitated him and took a sip and passed it to the hound. The hound hesitated for a while, raised his head and took a big sip and passed it to Joffrey. After everyone had drunk the wine, Sig smiled and began, everyone, it is fate that we can meet here. I met Lord Tyrion at the wall. How come we are old acquaintances? We have met, but you are wearing makeup at that time. The little devil seemed to like Sig's wine very much. He took the wine bag and took a big sip. You are not afraid of me doing something. You have already drunk it first. Besides, since you saved me, you can't want to kill me immediately, right? Stop talking nonsense. What do you want to tell us? The hound said with a look of vigilance. Sig looked at Joffrey, who was still confused. This is a long story. If I tell you that everyone is in hell and what I want to do is to save you, would it be too abrupt? Sig observed the expressions of everyone with interest. My respected saint, shouldn't this matter be discussed with the gods? It is more reliable to discuss it with us mortals than to discuss it with the archbishop. The little devil said sarcastically. Joffrey said nothing. The hound spat on the ground. One of the two servants laughed, then stopped laughing when he saw no one was laughing, while the other turned his head away with contempt. The reactions of the 5 people were all within his expectations. Joffrey, you are not going to live long. I could not predict the details, but with your personality, you would be assassinated even if you became king. Joffrey looked confused. Little devil, in the words of Grand Maester Aemon, you are a giant in thought. You have more possibilities. As long as you are not too unlucky, you will definitely achieve great things in the future. Unfortunately, you alone cannot break the cycle of hell. The big and small eyes stared at him coldly. Sandor Clegane, the hound, appears to be an accomplice to the tiger, but in fact he has a kind heart. Your real enemy is your brother, the mountain, and you dream of cutting him in two. He turned to the two servants, you will die. If it weren't for my intervention, you would have died in the mountain soon. As for how you died, I don't have time to analyze it carefully. Mr. Sigger, I am very disappointed in you. The little devil sighed, you are some kind of bard or charlatan, but unfortunately I don't believe in evil. The archbishop once persuaded me to believe in him, and I told him that God doesn't love me, so I won't love him either. Sig stood up, I'm not trying to make you believe anything, I'm just telling you the truth and the reasons for what I did. Sensing someone approaching, Lady Stark is obsessed with your crimes, we'd better set off as soon as possible. He said to the little devil, and ended the short rest of the 6 people. Violet, Joffrey stood up, his face solemn, she is, the young man's voice was stuck in his throat, as if choking him. Violet Evergreen is her real name. She is my companion, but unlike me, her body is also real. He looked at the prince's expression with some surprise, and his reaction was unexpected. Her goal is the same as mine. She is like a daughter to me. Joffrey breathed a sigh of relief. You sound like a missionary. If your goal is to make us all believe in religion, then I tell you, it's a waste of effort. The little devil said as he got on the horse. No, my goal is to stop you from believing in them. He pointed to the sky. Gods are not good things. They are like mischievous little devils who only want to see you get into trouble. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novellas. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49. Mountain Bandits. Why don't you lead the way? The Hound stared at Sig, alert. No, there is only one way to go. He stroked the mane of the warhorse in a good mood. If you want to prove that you are the spokesperson of God, shouldn't you turn your horse's head and kill the pursuers behind you? Maybe I will believe you. The little devil teased. No, you won't believe me. People only believe what they want to believe and can only understand what they can understand. He said to Joffrey, who was still a little dazed, My prince, you don't have to worry about anything. I am still your guard, and Violet will not betray her oath. Your existence is an important node to break the cycle of hell. We will not let anything happen to you. I don't know your identity, how can I trust you? Joffrey's eyes became clear, and he seemed to finally wake up. Good boy, regain your sanity. I will tell you my identity. You will understand it after being with me for a long time. But I suggest you dress up first. Little Lord Robert Baratheon is a mad mother. If she knew your identity, it might touch her nerves. Believe me, even the gods won't have a good way to deal with madmen. Joffrey was still full of doubts, but he still covered his blonde hair with his hood and smeared mud on his face out of habit. The sound of horsehood came from the west, and they had no choice but to go east to the Arryn Vale. The 2-day journey will encounter the fortress of the Arryn family, the Bloody Gate. We must think of a way before reaching the Bloody Gate, otherwise we must turn back and fight a bloody battle with Lady Stark's helpers. What are our chances of winning if we turn around and fight the crazy woman of the Tully family? The little devil rode to Sig. It depends on whether I join the war. What if you join? If I join, I will definitely win. He looked back at the little devil, but why should I join? The little devil took out a small black bag, a guarantee on the honor of the Lannister family that this bag is full of gold dragons. If I can return to Casterly Rock alive, your reward will be doubled. The Lannisters always pay, right? He finished the motto for the little devil. Yes, you are really smart, so I refuse. I will not turn around and kill people. Catelyn is very important. She herself is the core of history, and many things need to rely on her to promote. While observing the surroundings, someone on the hillside was watching them. Then you might as well kill a few of us, tie me up and ask for credit from her. Big and Small Eyes tried. He shook his head. Stop. With a loud shout, the leading hound turned his horse's head. There, he signaled the hound to pay attention to the hillside. The hound lowered his head, and his gray eyes flashed with uneasiness. Gather the horses in a circle. It's best to fix the reins so that the horses don't run around. What happened again? Joffrey seemed to sense the unusual atmosphere and was about to draw his sword, but was stopped by him. Don't be impatient, my prince. This is not a situation that can be solved with just a good sword. The 6 people dismounted and used boulders and a crooked butt-leaf tree to set up a defensive posture. As soon as they finished, the pursuers came with the sound of hoofs. There were 12 people in total, including the warriors who came with Lady Stark and Sir Rodriguez. Except for the lady and a bard holding a xylophone, the others were fully armed warriors. They approached the 6-person defense circle cautiously. An arrow was firmly nailed in front of Sir Rodriguez's warhorse. The knight comforted the warhorse. Don't resist. We have no intention of killing. As long as the dwarf goes to Winterfell to be tried, other things can be resolved peacefully. I asked to go to King's Landing or Casterly Rock. The little devil shouted in the middle of the defense line. Despicable thing, if you are really innocent, why don't you dare to go to Winterfell? We have fair law enforcers there. Catelyn rebuked with a scream. Sir Ilyn of King's Landing is more fair. I doubt that the law enforcers of Winterfell are more willing to listen to your one-sided words. The little devil put his hands on his hips and shouted to defend himself. Gentlemen, I know that you are all knights who value honor and responsibility. Please don't be deceived by the little devil. His actions will eventually be judged. I hope your dignity will not be tainted by his conspiracy. Catelyn rode forward herself, and she shook off Sir Rodriguez's hand. And the knight with the giant sword, you are a knight of the Baratheon family. I believe that your character is as clean as the cloak of the King's Guard. I promise you that the dwarf will be judged fairly. Please don't obstruct us. Madam, I also think that your character is noble, but your eyes must be bad. The one holding the giant sword is called Sig. He is a charlatan, not a noble knight. The little devil continued to make jokes. Sig pushed open a gap in the warhorse's defense line and walked sideways to the outside. Don't be nervous, don't shoot arrows. He instructed the two little demon servants who were drawing their bows and arrows, and came to the Duchess. We meet again, madam. It's you. Even though she was shrouded in anger, Catelyn still shouted in surprise. You are the Sellsworth Sig. Sir Rodriguez also recognized him. I don't understand, since you're a knight of the Baratheon family, why do you hide your identity, or is the emblem on your body fake? He felt the puzzled eyes from all directions. What is my identity can be discussed later. I suggest that you all come to the defense circle, otherwise you may become a hedgehog. A soldier in Catelyn's team was shot in the neck and fell over, with a scarlet arrow piercing his mouth. The situation instantly boiled over. Arrows and javelins flew everywhere. Catelyn's side fought on their own. Facing the attack from the cliff, they could not even talk about fighting back, but just trying to survive. Come to the line. Sig shouted, leaping up and riding with Catelyn before she could scream. The two rode back to the line. Despicable fellow, let the lady go. Sir Rodriguez chased after him angrily. Foolish thing, don't you understand who the real enemy is? Come in. Sig shouted angrily, and the old knight finally stumbled back to the line. The bandits' attack enveloped the line. Sig's face was solemn. He put away his greatsword, took around the shield and left the line to cover the others' retreat. Many warriors were shot to death by arrows and spears, and two were nailed to the ground and wailing. The hoods rumbled, the dust flew, and dozens of knights with messy equipment charged at them. The Hound lead for people, raised shields to reinforce, and rescued three more. When everyone finally retreated behind the warhorse line, the bandits charged directly to the line. Who are they? Asked the little devil. What do you think I know? He threw the spear he picked up and shot the big man in the shadow-mounted cat-skin cloak who was rushing in the front of his horse. He prepared the giant sword again. I am not omnipotent. Don't talk nonsense, everyone must take up arms. The warrior with a fierce appearance like a lean hungry wolf handed the little devil a battle axe. If you want to survive, join the battle, maybe the victory or failure depends on you. Sig looked at the fierce warrior seriously. He should be a mercenary, the one who was willing to share a room with the little devil in the inn before. Grey mist appeared on this person. He decided to do his best to ensure that this person would not die in the bandit sneak attack. For a long time afterwards, he was surrounded by blood. The bandits regarded him as the leader and kept gathering around to duel with him. He also had to distract himself to take care of those wrapped in grey mist. The pressure was huge. If an important person died here, God knows how the subsequent situation would develop, and the world might collapse. He was not pursuing destruction, and every step had to be cautious. He was not afraid of getting hurt, and his fighting power was not comparable to that of ordinary people. However, it was still difficult to maintain the front line. The leather armor of Zisha was stained red with blood, and there was a gap in the giant sword of Zisha, but the bandits' offensive continued. The woman's scream was particularly piercing. Seabiscuit's injury knocked the fighting bandits away. Lady Stark was on the other side of the battlefield, leaning against the cliff. A mounted bandit with two footmen was approaching her. It was too late. Even if Viserys exerted the limit of his body, he could not save her. If he wanted to have stronger power, he needed time to prepare. If Catelyn Stark died, he dared not imagine how chaotic the course of history would be. A low black shadow passed by the mounted bandit, and the battle axe chopped the bandit's lower back. The bandit shouted and fought back, but missed. Then he was also chopped in the abdomen, and blood mixed with blue intestines flowed out. Joffrey came from the other side with a steel sword in hand. The remaining 2-foot bandit suddenly remembered something important and ran away like a fly. The remaining dozens of people retreated like a tide. Chapter 50. Victory or death. Dozens of people were killed, and dozens escaped. On the surface, the knights won, but the bandits had an endless supply of soldiers, and they only had 9 people left. There is no way back. If there's another attack like this, we will be dead. We can only move forward, reach the Vale of Arryn, and ask them to send knights to escort us. Sieg announced loudly, and no one agreed or disagreed. Everyone, including the brave Hound, was exhausted. Respected Mr. Sieg, should I call you Mr. Knight of the Baratheon family? I don't know why you want to hide your identity, but this man is guilty. As the mother of the 7-year-old victim, I have the right to take him to trial. Catelyn Stark stood in front of him, holding the dagger in her hand. He had seen the dagger, decorated with a dragonbone handle and made of Valyrian steel. Although it was not a long sword, it was enough to be called a precious blade. Madam, you don't know him. He not only has the emblem of a crowned stag, but also the silver hair and purple eyes of a 3-headed dragon. In addition, he is a charlatan. It is a mistake to want to know who he is. Tyrion laughed on the side. Catelyn ignored him and looked at Sieg. I am a woman, and my strength is not as good as men. After seeing the battle just now, I admit that I am not able to take the little devil away. She is still young and still a charming woman. Under the gaze of her doe-like eyes, it is difficult for men not to be melted. It's a pity that I am not an ordinary man. He didn't say what was in his heart. Respected madam, under the current situation, it doesn't matter whether you catch the little devil. We are going to the Bloody Gate, which is the territory of your sister, Lady Lysa. I heard that she hates the Lannisters to the bone. I believe she is willing to hold the trial at the Moon Gate of the Eyrie. But I heard that the Uring Valley has a tradition of letting people fly. Let people fly. The little devil interrupted again, and this time the tone was no longer teasing, but full of concern. Yes, my lord. They threw the prisoner from the Moon Gate, falling 700 feet, leaving a pool of red marks on the rocks, and not even the bones could be found. The little devil shrank his neck. I think the judgment of King's Landing is more fair. Catelyn blinked. I thought you were on the side of the little devil. She sat beside him. He handed her a piece of blackened hard beef jerky. She shook her head and pushed it away. Last time we met, you mentioned my son's leg injury. Violet told me that she would ask her friends to treat it. Yes. He interrupted her. I am sick. She told me that when I have time, I will go to Winterfell to see little Bran's legs and waist. Violet has always blamed herself, thinking that she failed to protect little Bran. She hugged her knees. If you had met Bran, you would definitely like him. He is a good boy, a gentle boy. Hatred shot out of her eyes, but someone actually wanted to frame him. That person is not me, my lord. Shut up. The woman's fickleness was fully demonstrated in her. She was gentle and resentful at first, but suddenly she was stern. Sieg soaked the beef in white wine and handed it to her. You're blinded by anger. I believe someone wants to frame Bran, but it is definitely not the devil. Catelyn seemed to want to refute, but did not speak. She chewed the softened beef jerky in big mouthfuls in anger, and showed a surprised expression. It's delicious. The devil rubbed against her shamelessly. Mr. Sieg, I'm curious about the wine you soaked the beef in. This fragrance is not common. Catelyn turned her head away in disgust and looked away. Uncle, if you come back to King's Landing with us obediently, you can not only avoid boring accusations, but also enjoy Sieg's good wine earlier. This is brewed by himself. Joffrey took off his hood, and soaked his beef in the pot in the astonished eyes of the two. The Hound also made the same move, untied his disguise, and sat around. Am I dreaming? It won't be strange to see my elder sister appear later. The little devil smiled, while Catelyn turned around nervously. Don't worry, ma'am. The Queen didn't come with me. I took Joffrey out to travel. He listened attentively. On the way, he heard the howling of wolves and the roar of shadow-mounted cats. The beasts were sharing the corpses, and there was no sign of a sneak attack by mountain bandits. Although I sympathize with you and feel sorry for Bran's experience, you really did a stupid thing. Yes, stupid. The Hound grabbed the beef jerky and ate it in big mouthfuls. Sieg, you are such a good cook. You should go to Armor Rock, and Lord Tywin will pay you a good price. Stupid. It's stupid for me to seek justice for my son. Is this the honor of the Lannister family? That's right. To be able to attack little Bran, my soul must have been eaten by the devil. Her voice was sharp, attracting the old knight. Ha, Sieg said after putting down the task of helping everyone to cook the beef jerky. Madam, don't you understand yet? The problem is not what Bran did. You made things complicated and put your husband in danger, and your evidence is so untenable. Catelyn tilted her head disapprovingly. Your husband and even King Robert will die because of this. The 7 kingdoms will fall apart, and the people will suffer. What you did is more terrible than the bandits. There was silence all around. Even the vicious mercenaries who were eating and drinking stopped and looked at him. Lord Sieg, it would be great if you are really a charlatan. The little devil tried to stare at his big and small eyes. You don't need any magic or divine power, you only need your brain to draw conclusions. He pointed to his head and stared at the little devil. Lord Tywin hates you and wishes you would die immediately. Seeing the little devil nod, he continued, he will not allow the news of his son's capture to spread outside, which will affect the reputation of the Lannister family. Even if he hates you, he will stand up for you. The little devil nodded continuously. He turned to look at Catelyn. The woman was still angry. Madam, you're blinded by anger. No matter what the truth is, you're unauthorized. The rest of the Lannisters will inevitably anger the Lannisters who value prestige and retribution. They will use all means to fight back. Your husband will face the Queen's wrath in the court. The problem is that he may be involved without knowing it. Catelyn still held her head high. He knew very well that she was holding on. In addition, your father, Duke Tully of Riverrun, may also face the Lannister army under extremely unfavorable circumstances. I heard that your father has been ill in bed for a long time. This time Catelyn lowered her head, her shoulders trembling slightly. There is no need to be so troublesome. I will immediately make my identity clear and ask Lacey to send someone to escort Lady Stark and my uncle to King's Landing, where my father will give everyone an explanation. Joffrey said with his head held high. Seed laughed. This is why I think the Queen did not teach you well. Under his gaze, Joffrey was inexplicably confused. You don't understand what the Game of Thrones is. There is no justice, only calculation, no justice, only victory or defeat. It is a game where you either win or die. Any self-righteousness is dangerous. Do you think Winterfell and Casterly Rock will wait for the verdict obediently without making any moves? No matter what the truth is, once things get out of hand, they must win, otherwise they will be suppressed or even destroyed. You will see the war going on in the court, and King Robert is dragged into the quagmire without knowing it. He may even be assassinated by the party that he thinks is at a disadvantage. Joffrey opened his mouth in shock. I don't understand. My father is the king, and he is also the most powerful warrior in the Seven Kingdoms. The Mad King is also a king. Wisdom he killed. From ancient times to the present, how many kings have died of old age? He patted the prince on the shoulder. This is the kind of game you're about to face, where you either win or die, and you are not ready to join the game. This is the reason why the Queen's education has failed. Eddard won't do that. He values honor more than life. Catelyn argued. Yes, he won't do that. He is a rare good man in 1,000 years, so I can only say that the northern nobles, river nobles, your children and his vassals are all in trouble. One side values honor and is timid in doing things, while the other side has no scruples. Well said. The vicious mercenary praised with a laugh, and Catelyn glanced at him with disgust. Madam, don't you understand? In the Game of Thrones, you either win or die. If Duke Stark is really a benevolent and perfect knight, it is your biggest mistake to drag him into such a struggle. Your action to capture the little devil was really ill-considered, and you will kill all the people you love. Catelyn looked like she was about to cry. She raised her head stubbornly, refusing to lower it. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.